Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Hellbent in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 6, Show Me How to Lie. Sakura has a bad feeling about what her afternoon will hold the moment she and Naruto step foot into the Konoha apothecary. Normally she adores the small store tucked into a back alley of the merchant district. It's one of the oldest shops in the entirety of Konoha and is absolutely filled to the brim with shelves of trailing greenery, strange and brightly colored flowers, and jars that glitter in the light that pours in through the skylights cut into the roof. The air in the apothecary always smells verdant and cleaner than the rest of Konoha. The retired kunoichi that works behind the counter is quick with a smile or tip about plants. Today, it does little to lift Sakura's dragging feet or ease the tingling worry at the back of her neck. She's tired and sore, and even though the sun is only just beginning to rise over the tiled roofs, she's already been awake for nearly 4 hours. Kakashi's workout regimen for her is brutal. She wakes up most mornings feeling like she's been put through a meat grinder and is still expected to get up and push even harder than she did the day before. It's torture, but she's starting to see a difference. Her shoulders are stronger and her steps more steady. Unlike the first week when she couldn't even make it all the way around Konoha without needing to rest, now most mornings she's managing nearly 3 laps at a decent pace. Things are getting better with the boys too. She watches Naruto push open the door to the apothecary without pausing the rambling story he's been telling her since they left the Haytake compound nearly 20 minutes ago. She smiles to herself. A few weeks ago she would have probably hit him to shut him up about 19 minutes ago, but now she finds herself relaxing a bit to the sound of his cheerful voice. Things with Sasuke are still awkward. She shouldn't expect them to be best friends right away after the way she treated him, but it's still discouraging to see those moments where he regards her with suspicion more than camaraderie. She knows that her crush on the other boy is completely over. Hearing from the mouth of one of the legendary Sannin that Sakura's worship of him was just a byproduct of a village-wide manipulation tactic designed to isolate him had cast things in a new light, to say the least. But she doesn't think Sasuke really believes that yet. There are some bright spots though. Yesterday, for example, when he had helped her up after Naruto's fit and when he burned the kunoichi pamphlet. Their promise. She has to hold on to the good moments like that. Even if they still aren't a perfect team, even if the boys still don't trust her and are waiting for her to revert to the vapid, cruel, weak version of herself that she wore like a carnival mask for nearly the entire time she knew them, she knows they will get better. Because she won't ever put that mask on again. She can't really prove that to them outside of her actions day by day, but she knows with the same certainty with which she cut her hair in the forest of death and with which she promised to protect them both, she can never go back to the wilting, half-alive girl she had been. Besides, even if the three of them are still cautious of each other, are still not really sure how they fit together, Sakura is beginning to see the shape they'll take. She thinks Kakashi might see it too, the way that when they get over the stumbling blocks of their messy histories, they flow together like a perfect melody. She is growing more sure with every passing day that if they can survive what comes next, they'll need her as much as she's growing to need them, maybe more. Naruto interrupts her introspections as he skips ahead of her down the central aisle of the apothecary, commenting loudly and constantly about the interesting things on the shelves. Sakura smiles at his enthusiasm. It's refreshing to see after the sober cloud that followed him all of yesterday. Apparently Kurama hasn't really returned to normal yet, but he's at least moving around again in whatever space he occupies inside Naruto's form. As far as she knows, he still hasn't told Naruto exactly what happened to make him withdraw so much. When they asked about it, Naruto had frowned and reiterated the sense of goneness, of empty space, but hadn't actually been able to clarify much more than that. She rolls her shoulders, working out a knot of soreness she somehow hasn't noticed till now, and then calls out to Naruto. Go look for what Sensei wanted. I'm going to check out some herbs over here. There is a shout of what is probably a scent and then the sound of something crashing to the ground. Sakura winces and turns to the shelf she's near. She may be growing to cherish Naruto as a friend, but she won't fight all his battles for him, especially against old lady Midori, who is sweet but was also probably an umbu before she owned this shop. The bell above the door gives a cheery jingle as someone else steps into the store. She doesn't bother looking up. "Ah, it's you," comes a bored-sounding baritone from her left. Sakura stiffens instantly. Her thoughts leap from amusement over Naruto to rapid-fire calculations interspersed with curse words as Shikamaru Nero considers her with a blasé look on his face. The high-pitched laugh and warm chakra that precludes the arrival of the other two members of Team 10 barely registers. Of all of the rookie 9 to run into, Team 10 is probably the worst for keeping their plans under wraps if solely for the teenage boy that stands next to her now, head cocked slightly to the side as he studies her. Sakura doesn't let panic delay her reactions even a moment longer, she can't afford to. She turns and smiles benignly at the Nara genius who stands with his hands in his pockets. He's looking at her like a leaf that's fallen on his shogi board. Better a leaf than the player across from him, Sakura tells herself to quell the instant flash of annoyance at being so clearly and completely underestimated. Hello Shikamaru, Ino, Koji. She greets coolly as the other two members of Team 10 step into the store. Ino, with a new thin, silvery scar tracing along her jaw catching the light, goes from grinning at her teammate to stony in an instant. I did that, thinks Sakura, looking at the scar, guilty at the flare of warmth the thought brings. Ino was once her best friend, the most important person in the world to her. What does it say about Sakura that she feels a tug of pride at the mark she's left on the other girl? No time to focus on that now. Sakura, Ino says with a sneer. Haven't seen you around the village much. I thought Sasuke must have finally gotten tired of your pathetic attempts at wooing him and wrung your scrawny little neck. Sakura shrugs and doesn't take the bait even though it once would have had her steaming. Just training at the Heitake compound for the Chiryunin finals. I'm sure Asuma-sensei has you all busy as well. Ino seems to get even angrier at her bland tone if that's possible. Thankfully, Shikamaru has turned to look dully through one of the nearby windows at the clouds drifting by outside, seemingly uninterested in the bickering. Shikamaru is doing most of the training, Koji offers with a friendly smile. Ino and I aren't in the finals so we are cheering him on while he gets ready. The genin in question is still completely checked out of the conversation. Good, the less attention he's paying to her the better. As long as she can keep anything from piquing his interest then this little meetup shouldn't even be a bump in the road. Naruto appears around a corner, his naturally loud voice ringing through the little shop. Sakura. Granny Midori helped me find the Valerian. Shikamaru turns from the window, dark eyes locking on the blonde Jinchuriki immediately. Sakura nearly curses aloud. She slams her emotions behind a stone wall as the Nara genius flicks his gaze to her. She's glad she's learned from the best when it comes to masking one's emotions because the fastest way to turn this from a problem into a game ender is to act guilty. Naruto has shuffled to a stop next to her and picking up on her tension is glaring at the group of teens blocking their path to the door. Valerian root? Ino, does your family grow that one in your greenhouse? Shikimaru wonders, still sounding bored. Sakura isn't fooled. That was an opening move. It's going to force her into a defensive position because both Shikamaru and Sakura absolutely know that. No, Ino is saying thoughtfully, it's a controlled herb. I believe it's used as dash. A sedative. Sakura cuts her off with an embarrassed smile, but please don't mention to anyone that we were here picking some up. Yes, I'm uncomfortable and guilty about this interaction, but not for any interesting reason, she channels with all her might. What would you want with a sedative, billboard brow? Asks Ino with a mean smile. That's a really shitty way to get into Sasuke's pants, you know. At this, Naruto's eyes go from slightly aggressive to scalding. Sakura can feel the beginning flickers of familiar energy as the seal flexes and bends under the flow of Naruto's spiking emotions. Sakura wonders if this is how Kakashi feels on a daily basis as things begin to spin rapidly out of her control. Don't fucking talk about him like that, and leave Sakura alone, the boy growls, taking one threatening step towards Ino. The young kunoichi rolls her eyes in his direction, like it takes effort to even acknowledge that he's trying to threaten her. Ino's survival instincts have never been the sharpest, Sakura thinks distantly. The other girl's attention sharpens when she notices Naruto's face. Sakura knows that Shikamaru clocked the change the second Naruto rounded the corner. The color contacts are a new look Naruto, Ino coos meanly, a replacement for the tacky orange get-up. Naruto's chakra flexes again, grows more unsteady. Shit, chants Sakura mentally, watching as Shikamaru's eyes narrow at her blonde teammate. She has to find a way to diffuse the reactive chakra pouring from Naruto. The valerian is for me, she cuts in, trying to change the subject. I've dashed. She pauses like she's struggling to get it out, been having some trouble sleeping. At the same time Sakura reaches, carefully, stealthily, and places a hand against Naruto's wrist. She can feel the thrum of turbulent energy racing under his skin there. Take the bait, Ino, Sakura begs in her mind as she focuses her attention on the chakra escaping Naruto's control. The blonde kunoichi in training jumps on the crumb that Sakura's dropped like a hungry crow. Feeling a little nervous about the finals, Haruno? Sakura glares at her, popping one hand on her hip and forcing a flush onto her cheeks even as her other hand remains surreptitiously against Naruto's wrist. Nothing for you to worry about, Ino pig, but yes. Kakashi-sensei said pre-exam stress is very normal. Sakura is barely focusing on the verbal sparring. She can feel the racing bubbling energy that is so uniquely Fox/Naruto. It's flavored like ash in hot summer days and blood in protective rage. She tugs at it, channeling the escaping steam of power into her own skin. She uses her own chakra to begin smoothing the sharp edges. She nearly flinches at the immediate, overwhelming burn of it. Ah, poor whittle billboard brow, Ino sings songs, leaning into her space and promoting another growl from Naruto. Another spike in his energy. Having nightmares about how stupid you'll look eating shit in front of the whole village. No, my worries are more along the lines of being captured and tortured by Umbu for treason, or Sensei messing up when he's removing the curse mark and killing Sasuke, or Naruto's seal disintegrating further, or being the reason we get caught when we leave the leaf because I'm still too damn weak, or your fucking teammate being too smart for his own good and unraveling the whole thing before we even have a chance to try, Sakura thinks. Out loud she just huffs and looks away, risking a quick glance at Shikamaru. He's not watching Naruto anymore, instead, his eyes have focused on her. A shiver trails down Sakura's spine. She's never had the full genius of the Konoha 12's most impressive genin focused on her before. It's equal parts unsettling and exhilarating. Not a player, she chants in her mind, hoping with all her might that she's still the leaf on his board and not something worth devoting that terrifying intellect towards. Some part of her wants to be a player though, wants the thrill of weighing her intellect against the other teenager. She won't gamble with her team's lives like that though. Once again focusing on the power she's acting as a conduit for, Sakura carefully channels the excess chakra from Naruto's anger and lets it flow through her system. It's 100 times more difficult than she expected, like trying to do arithmetic while being mildly electrocuted. She has to smooth over and balance the sharp fluctuating edges of the energy while keeping her own chakra from spinning out of control. She remembers Kakashi's voice from months ago when they were tree climbing in Wave, the surprised, impressed smile as he complimented her natural control. She uses that to fuel her, and even as the unstable chakra burns at her she carefully redirects and neutralizes it. It seems to be working, the overflow is becoming less obvious and Naruto's agitation seems to be decreasing. The boy stiffens suddenly, his chakra flow becoming disrupted again, and Sakura prays to every god she knows that it's just because the boy needs to sneeze and not because. The shop bell jingles again. She hates that fucking bell. Gaara of the Sand, apparent Jinchuriki of the One Tail according to what Naruto has told Team 7, steps into the shop. His strange pupil-less eyes search around the space before finally landing on Naruto. It's a right party in the apothecary today, Sakura thinks, stress ratcheting up several more notches. Team 10 shifts, unsubtle, moving into defensive stances as the eerie teen drifts further into the store. Naruto and Gaara are staring at each other. You really hurt Lee, Naruto says eventually, less anger in his voice and chakra than Sakura expects. In general, her teammate feels calmer than she would have guessed he would be when faced with the unstable Jinchuriki of the Sand. Naruto cocks his head suddenly, crimson gaze brightening in a way she's seen before as he considers the other boy. Sakura's hand on his wrist suddenly burns as a deluge of chakra rushes to the surface of Naruto's skin. Kurama, she thinks. Gaara still hasn't responded to the comment aloud, but as his gaze remains locked with Naruto's, his brow furrows tightly and he twitches almost like a fly has landed on him and he's shaking it off. There are several long beats of silence. Naruto barks out a sudden laugh. It's sharp and rough and very obviously not his laugh. Sakura is hit with the realization that not only is there an entire conversation happening here that she is not privy to, but she is well and truly out of her depth. Shikamaru seems to have come to the same conclusion because while his expression hasn't changed much from when he first stepped into the shop, the look in his eyes is sharp and spinning with calculations. Naruto, no, Kurama, crosses his arms, smooth and controlled, and a jagged smirk curls across his face. Gaara hisses at him, taking a threatening step forward. You best watch yourself, the Sand Genin finally speaks aloud. His voice, as Sakura remembers hearing it, had been dry and cold and unsettling like the desert at midnight. This voice is completely different. It's even deeper than Kurama's and edged with maniac straining energy, like a kettle moments away from boiling over. The tension inside the little shop expands as killing intent and chakra radiate from the two Jinchuriki. It's nowhere near the levels she knows the fox can reach when truly agitated, but with the addition of the sandpapery, hot scraping bloody feeling of what she assumes is the One-Tail's chakra, Sakura feels like crawling out of her skin. The Kyuubi's grin curls even further. You really have lost touch with reality if you think you're even close to a threat to me. The energy of the seal flexes, even more pronounced now. Sakura reaches out again, touching her teammate's arm, and tries desperately to channel some of the overwhelming chakra away. It fucking hurts though, like being set on fire. It's not worth the risk right now. Team 10 doesn't seem to be able to settle on where to look, gazes bouncing between the two Jinchuriki. Ino has dropped into a battle stance, hand on the hilt of her kunao and sweat beading at her temple. Koji too looks shaken, bright rosy cheeks gone ashen and fists shaking slightly as he clenches them. Shikamaru, on the other hand, seems nearly unaffected. He takes a lazy step back as if he were going to recline against the wall. His hand comes to rest almost casually on a glass jar of powdered hogweed. Another piece moving on an increasingly high-stakes board, Sakura thinks, eyes flicking to Shikamaru's falsely disinterested expression. Hogweed causes blindness, so if things go sideways he's going to. It doesn't matter though, she knows how this would shake out if it came to blows even better than the tactical genius next to her does. So apparently, does Gaara and whoever is speaking through him. The Kyuubi cocks a daring eyebrow at the red-haired boy, and Gaara, or his passenger perhaps, snarls at the expression but steps back. The smug grin pulls back across Naruto's face. Glad to see you can still do basic arithmetic, Kurama says cruelly, and Sakura understands instantly that he's talking about the power of the Nine Tails compared to the One Tail. She's grateful that Kurama has so effectively talked down the other tailed beast, but Shikamaru is still standing there, watching all of this with a dangerous spark of intrigue growing in his eyes. Sakura is becoming more concerned by the second that he's going to figure out more about what the implications of the confusing exchange means than their little insurgents can survive. She has to do something. As subtly as possible, Sakura reaches over and elbows Kurama sharply in the side. She doesn't even know if the fox can feel things that are happening to Naruto's body, or if he can, if he'll choose to break her neck for the insult of hitting him, but she is running concerningly low on options at the moment. She resists the urge to look at Shikamaru, certain that calculating gaze will be back on her. Naruto-kun, she smiles sweetly, somehow managing to bury the pure adrenaline coursing under her skin. We really need to be getting back to Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke. How about you talk with Gaara some other time? When we have less that we need to get done. It's all said innocently enough, unspecifically enough, but she shoots the fox a reproachful look and hopes to the high heavens that the message gets across. Not the time for this fight, not with this audience, not with just over a week till we run. The Nine Tails tilts his head, raising a brow at her. She glares back. Come on you bastard, she thinks, I'm trying to save our skins here. Sure, we can go. Lots to do and all that. Kurama says after a beat. Then, sending one last sharp-toothed smile towards Gaara, he says, Hey Gaara, you should tell the voices in your head to start being useful for once. It tends to make life a little more interesting, I've recently discovered. The sarcastic lilt and meaning to his words are far more obvious than Sakura would like, but at least he seems to be listening to her. Plus her head is still attached to her shoulders, so, small victories. Shikamaru cuts in. While you are here you should grab something for Naruto's cold too. His voice is sounding awfully hoarse. His dark eyes meet her pale ones, and in them is not quite an acknowledgement, but dangerous, damning, curiosity. Sakura knows that with the intellect powering it, if that curiosity grows, it's a death sentence for their secrets. A month ago she would have been delighted for Shikamaru to see her as someone who was worth recognizing, to notice that she's brilliant too. Now though, Sakura smiles at him as vapidly and brightly as she can. We have something back at the compound, thank you for your concern, Shikamaru. For the first time since he's entered the shop he grins. It reminds her a little of Kurama, fewer sharp teeth maybe, but no less dangerous. Sure, he drawls. Good luck on your preparations, Sakura. Sakura doesn't think he's ever said her name before this conversation. She isn't sure how she feels about it now. Grabbing Naruto's wrist and tugging, she maneuvers them through the crowded apothecary and out the door. She can feel eyes on their backs. Between the four sets, she's fairly certain that the blood-crazy, unstable Jinchuriki isn't the greatest threat to them at the moment either. Shikamaru intently watches the pink head of hair duck out of the shop. There is silence in the apothecary except for the gentle tinkling sound made by the little bell above the door as it closes behind the two retreating members of Team 7. Gaara of the Sand watches the exit as well, face twisted with uneasy anger. He glances back at the still defensive Team 10 and then with a snarl, spins and ducks out the apothecary too. Shikamaru sets the jar of hogweed down with a clink. There is a beat of silence. That fucking bitch, snarls Ino, breaking the stillness. It was like she was looking right through me. After what she did too. She's crying. Furious tears streaming down her pretty pale cheeks and dripping onto the collar of her shirt. Koji, ever the good teammate, wraps one large arm around her shoulder and offers a gentle smile, though he still looks somewhat uneasily towards where Gaara exited. Both he and Shikamaru know that the thing with Sakura has been a sore spot for Ino recently. She had waited for Sakura for hours in the hospital after their fight, absolutely certain that the Pinkette would come see her to trade barbs and promises just like old times. The other girl had never shown though. In fact, she and the other members of Team 7 had been all but ghosts for the past 3 weeks. Shikamaru hadn't been particularly worried about it. Very few things that were considered topics of gossip among the ninja around him are ever worth focusing more than 1/20th of his attention on. Or so he had thought until bumping into the ghosts in question themselves. Shikamaru's thoughts whirl. He'd almost missed it, a rarity for him to say the least, but over the years he has just gotten so used to filing away anything Sakura did as Uchiha fangirl madness and nothing more. But, when he'd said hello to her just now, she had frozen. There should be no reason for Sakura to be anxious about running into him. Bitchy and annoyed perhaps, they've never gotten along after all, but that hadn't been her reaction at all. She had looked for all the world like a little kid caught with their hand in the candy jar. He had first thought that she was distressed about seeing Ino, who usually tailed along after him like a particularly annoying little dog. That would have made sense. Anxiety over bumping into an old flame, excuse him, friend, was common and boring. But it wasn't about Ino at all. His still sobbing teammate had been right that all of Harano's interactions with her had been performative at best, a shallow imitation of the rancor the girls had once shared. Sakura's stress had been directed at him. Even more poignant, she had been trying to hide said stress from him. But why? The pieces dance and shift in Shikamaru's mind, Naruto and Gaara's strange interactions, the Valerian, Sasuke's absence, and most interesting of all, Sakura's sharp jade eyes, darting and calculating, and so desperately trying to seem as shallow as ever. A knot of secrets laid before him, Team 7 tied up in its midst. Before he had walked into this shop he had been thinking about how bored he was growing of Asuma's lectures about the Chiryunin exams. The universe, annoying as it was, had offered him an apology for all the nagging it seems. What better way to cure boredom for one Shikamaru Nara than to untangle puzzles? His gray eyes track once more to the spot where Sakura had been standing. My move, Harano, he thinks with a small smile. Chapter 7, Standing at the Cliff. When the evening they've set to remove the curse mark finally arrives, Sasuke feels as though his skin is going to crawl off his body. The dimmed mark is like a spider crouched against his throat at all times, vibrating with malice and poisonous falsity. I can offer you power. I can make you invincible, it seems to hiss directly into his mind without ceasing. He's gotten very good at ignoring it, but it's exhausting to say the least. Tonight Orochimaru's touch feels more agitated than normal, its whispered promises more desperate. Sasuke can't help but wonder if it somehow knows that its hours are numbered. He's sitting in the large dining room that they've pretty much never used in all their time here at the Haytake compound. Team 7 usually eats in the kitchen proper, so they just don't have a need for the massive space. The most action the room has seen so far was that one time last week that Sakura chased Naruto around the house after he had played fetch with the Ninken using her hairbrush. Now, the dusty banquet table has been shoved out of the room along with all the chairs. The dying light of evening coming from the high windows on one wall sends shadows long and dark across the floor. The air itself feels charged, anticipatory, taut. Or maybe that's just him projecting. Sasuke can hear Naruto and Sakura bickering in the connected kitchen, sniping back and forth over who has to wash the largest soup pan, and the sound of splashing sudsy water, most likely aimed at each other. He knows them well enough by now to hear the currents of tension underlying their playful squabbling, the strain of reaching their first true barrier as a team. Everything hinges on tonight. Sasuke isn't alone in the empty dining hall. Kakashi crouches across the room from him, doing a final check on the lines of the array he's painted across the floor. The white-haired Jonin's Sharinon traces over a page in one of the Fuinjutsu tomes he's taken to carting around the past couple days, comparing whatever's on the page to what he's painstakingly copied down. It's easily the largest seal Sasuke has ever seen, nearly 15 feet across and brimming with precise lines and symbols. Kakashi had spent nearly the entire day hunched over with a pot of red ink, a stack of dusty books and scrawled notes, and a foldable ruler, working inch by perfectly precise inch to lay the array on the bamboo floor. Sasuke watches as his sensei flips a few pages, pulls out a sheet of notes, narrows his eyes at them, and then after a few beats stuffs them away and snaps the huge book closed. Kakashi announces in the nearly maniacally cheerful tone with which Sasuke has recently grown very familiar, "Well, if it isn't right then I have no idea what's wrong with it, and hopefully me and you will die painlessly." Sasuke would be worried more about Kakashi's recent tendency to talk about them dying with a smile on his face if he didn't kinda get it. Team 7 has been running themselves ragged physically and emotionally for the past 3 weeks. Between their efforts to not only escape the village successfully, but also remove his curse mark and keep Naruto's seal from disintegrating further, and that damned Nara or anyone else from catching on to what they are up to, the stress is starting to take its toll. All of them are getting a little punchy is the nice way to put it, Sasuke thinks. Suicidally close to just saying fuck it and cutting the curse mark off with a kunai and then going to assassinate the damn Hokage himself may be closer to the mark. Naruto ducks into the room before Sasuke can follow that particularly lovely daydream much further. The blonde still has soap suds at the edges of his rolled-up shirt sleeves, and some of the damp from washing dishes has stuck strands of his bright hair to his forehead. The red of his eyes is still new, but not in a bad way, Sasuke thinks as he watches the steadiness with which Naruto moves. He's gotten stronger in this past month. Meanwhile, Sasuke has been sitting on his ass in the village that destroyed his entire world and doing nothing. Use me. I can make you strong. I won't ever make you sit on the sidelines, whispers the curse mark. Sasuke lifts a hand to his neck and digs his nails into it, glad for the sharp spike of pain to pull him away from those damning promises. At the movement, red eyes flash his direction, catching his gaze before crinkling in a dazzling smile. The curse mark's whispering immediately fades to background noise as Sasuke instead determinedly ignores the swooping lurch his stomach gives at Naruto's smile. He still lets his lips curl up slightly in response though. Naruto beams at the acknowledgement. Sakura follows their blonde teammate out of the kitchen and looking between the two of them rolls her eyes skyward. She ducks around Naruto and walks over to Kakashi, who is checking over the chakra vessel that sits at the edge of the massive seal. "Dinner's all put away, sensei. Is the seal ready to go?" Sakura asks. "We'll find out," Kakashi replies cheerfully. Sakura shoots him a look but chooses not to argue with him. Naruto jogs over to where Sasuke is sitting against the wall. "How are you feeling?" he asks. "Is the valerian working yet?" Sasuke shrugs. He had taken the strange drug that Kakashi had mixed for him right after dinner. The goal was to dampen his body's natural fear responses and resistances. The seal that Kakashi had laid, a contravene seal as he'd been calling it, would be invading every inch of his chakra system, and if Sasuke's body tried to fight against it, removing the mark wouldn't have a chance in hell of working. A little dizzy, a little sluggish, Sasuke answers honestly. That's good, Sakura tells him, having made her way over without him noticing. Kakashi-sensei said that its effect shouldn't be too overt, just something to relax you so the seal will be less likely to cause damage. I don't like that it can cause damage at all, Naruto mumbles sullenly. It's a conversation they've had as a team several times now. I'll be fine, Dobe, Sasuke says even as Sakura opens her mouth to probably explain again that messing around with chakra systems and seals was always dangerous and that they had taken all the precautions they could given their limited resources. Naruto nods, eyes flicking once worriedly between Sasuke and the seal behind them. Visibly steeling himself, the blonde holds out a fist into the center of their little group. Together, he declares. It's the mantra they've taken to murmuring to each other in those moments when what they are trying to do seems unreachable. When Sakura came home sobbing from the Office of Internal Affairs after emancipating herself from her family, when Sasuke woke up screaming from a nightmare of his parents' bodies at his feet, when the 8 trigrams seal burned like fire through Naruto's body and he curled on the floor feverish and weak, they reminded each other of the promise that they weren't alone, that they were a team and would walk alongside one another. Sakura and Sasuke reach without hesitation to rest their own fists against Naruto's. Together, Sakura agrees with a smile. Sasuke just presses his knuckles more tightly against theirs, grounding himself in the warmth of Naruto's skin and the growing calluses on Sakura's fist. Kakashi stands across the room, silent as he watches the three of them. Ready? He asks as Team 7 steps back from one another. Sasuke nods and, moving around Sakura and Naruto, starts to make his way towards the contravene seal. A hand catches his wrist. Sasuke looks back to meet Naruto's eyes. The blonde's grip is tight enough that Sasuke can feel the bones of his wrist grinding together, but he doesn't mind. He gets it. Don't be a scaredy cat, he murmurs to the Jinchuriki, smiling at the immediate tick of annoyance that appears on Naruto's brow at what is becoming an inside joke between them. I'll be fine. Naruto looks back and forth between his eyes for a few moments longer, searching before he quietly responds. Don't let something as lame as this kill you, okay? We've still got a lot to do. Sasuke nods and then waits patiently for Naruto to release his wrist. The other boy does, a reluctance to his movements even now. Sasuke ignores his counterpart's fear, ignores his own too, and steps into the seal on the floor. Immediately he feels a sickening lurch in his stomach. His vision rolls, vertigo assaulting his balance and skin cling violently. A bolt of pain pulses from the mark down through his body, starting slow and then increasing in tempo as he nears the center of the array. The Valyrian takes some of the serrated edge off the feeling thankfully, but it still hurts. His face must twist with discomfort because Kakashi's voice comes garbled to his ears, as if he's deep underwater. If it's hurting, then that probably means the contravene seal is right. The curse mark is reacting negatively. Good to know, Sasuke bites out without trying to quiet the sarcastic twist to his words. He pushes forward, feeling the world tilt and bend around him, and in a desperate bid for stability he focuses his eyes on the rest of Team 7. Kakashi crouches at the edge of the seal in front of him, face drawn, hair haphazard and both eyes ringed in the shadows of the sleepless nights it's taken to prepare this ritual. His teammates have moved next to their sensei. Sakura is kneeling right next to Kakashi and has snatched one of his books and is glancing rapidly between it and the seal, uncaring about the pink strands falling into her face or the dust getting on her loose sweatpants. And Naruto, bright and strong and impossible, is focused on Sasuke, just like Sasuke is on him. Red eyes holding black like a waypoint on an unsteady horizon. Sasuke can hear the other boy's voice echoing in his head, we've still got a lot to do. All four of them do. His team. Come what may, Sasuke realizes, he doesn't regret a moment of this past month. Stillness and arguments and nightmares and tragedies and all, he wouldn't take any of it back. Sasuke steps into the center of the seal and waits for whatever will happen next, knowing he won't meet it alone. Kakashi watches the nearly drunk way that his student stumbles to the center of the contravene seal and feels trepidation pool in his gut like a bad omen. He had extrapolated from what he could find in his research that the curse mark would start reacting negatively to the seal right away, but he didn't expect it to be this severe. If its hold on Sasuke is enough to cause this level of harm with only passive intervention. Kakashi feels his heartbeat ratchet up. He glances to the side at the chakra vessel next to him. It's a large, dark crystal in an artfully welded, metal base, with seals of containment and release carved along its sides. Kakashi stole it from the barrier and containment unit's storage chamber more than a fortnight ago, and it's both the only reason he has even a chance in hell of pulling the curse mark off alone, and also the reason they've had to wait this long to try it all. Kakashi has spent at least an hour each day pouring every spare ounce of chakra he has into the crystal. Without it he wouldn't have a fraction of the energy it's going to take to activate and maintain the contravene seal. Only minutes ago he was sure the vessel had a dense enough concentration of chakra to unwrite the mark, to power the seal and use it as a fulcrum to lever the mark carefully out of where it had burrowed into Sasuke's body, but now. No time to let the fear stop him now. He hasn't had the time to stop since Sasuke's quiet voice broke apart everything he thought he knew about the village nearly 3 weeks ago. He hasn't really had time to stop since he found his father's lifeless corpse more than 20 years ago. All Kakashi has ever known how to do is carry on. Sasuke reaches the center of the seal and comes to a shaky stop. The young Uchiha turns to his sensei, his face pale but set with fierce determination. "Ready?" Kakashi asks. They both know it doesn't matter if Sasuke is or not, they have to get the mark off today or he won't have enough time to recover before they have to leave the village. But Kakashi still feels like he at least has to ask. Once the seal is activated and fully has its talons in the curse mark, Kakashi won't be able to stop it without risking severely injuring the Uchiha. There is a reason it takes years of study to be a medic ninja of the caliber able to handle chakra networks, let alone issues as complicated as this curse mark. Thanks to the research he's poured so much of his time into, Kakashi isn't flying completely blind, but he does feel a bit like he's heading straight for a typhoon with paper wings. Nevertheless, Sasuke nods. Without waiting any longer, Kakashi sets an ungloved hand against the crystal vessel and begins to pull the stored chakra out of it and channel it into the array. It's a precise and careful process. The activation sequence for the seal has to be done in the exact right order to not only allow for the chakra to flow through the matrix but to counteract the natural patterns within the curse mark, all without causing irreparable damage to Sasuke's own system. Kakashi has spent nearly 100 hours in the Konoha archive over the past 3 weeks and he still barely understands what he's doing as he energizes the 4 cardinal docks and the connecting yang reticulation. The contravene seal begins to glow, the golden sparking light racing along the multitudes of lines painted across the floor, faster than the eye can follow. The air fills with a dangerous smell, burning and ozone and the unique scent of impossibly concentrated chakra. Sakura and Naruto, crouched next to Kakashi near the edge of the array, try to follow the progress of the energy, the bright light catching on fearful crimson and jade eyes. But Sasuke, in the midst of the shining chaos, breathes out and closes his eyes. The tension releases from his muscles and he stands, calm and steady, as the energy of the seal barrels towards him. These kids' trust in him is going to be the thing that breaks him, Kakashi thinks for a moment. It's going to break him, and maybe, if he doesn't get them killed, it will put him back together too. No time to wonder, no time to be afraid. The chakra lines collide with Sasuke's body in a flash and Kakashi instantly adjusts, twisting the energy and directing it into his student. His Sharingan spins, tracking the pulse of chakra as he pushes it through Sasuke's feet, up his spine, past his vulnerable heart and right into the corrupting mark on his neck. Sasuke arches like he's been electrocuted and a scream rips out of his lips. Kakashi barely registers it when Naruto shouts his teammate's name and lurches forward, Sakura's white-knuckled grip the only thing keeping him from rushing into the glowing matrix. He can't spare any focus for the Jinchuriki as the energy of the seal burrows into the curse mark, like fire rushing through rotted roots, like lighting through veins. Only, that's too simple, because the curse mark is fighting back. It shouldn't be able to do that. Everything Kakashi had read said that curse marks were stagnant manifestations of their architect's will, less flexible and versatile than seals. This mark, however, breathes. It writhes against the energy of the contravene seal, burrowing away from the cleansing chakra as if it's escaping deeper into the network of Sasuke's chakra pathways. Kakashi curses, doubles his pull on the vessel crystal and increases the force of the cleansing energy. If he loses even a modicum of the curse mark's darkness in the windings of Sasuke's chakra system, it will grow back twice as strong and 3 times as corrosive as before. The air of the room begins to shift and spiral. The massive amounts of energy create gusts of wind that pull at their clothes, and chakra escaping the seal fills the space with sparks of light and fire. Kakashi can't hear the wind. He can't even tell if Sasuke is screaming anymore. His own ears are filled with roaring as chakra rushes through his veins. Kakashi doesn't think he's ever channeled this much energy before in his life, and his very skin aches with it. But it's working. The mark is dying. He can feel it shriveling and burning as Kakashi forces the energy from the contravene seal through its winding pathways. Kakashi feels a flicker of hope. Then everything goes to shit. The vessel crystal lets out an ominous creak, flashes once dully, and then a crack appears at its base, winding rapidly up across the surface. The chakra pouring from within gutters, flickers, and fails. The light in the room shifts instantly, changing from the warm glow to a cold, sharp white as the seal begins pulling directly from Kakashi's own chakra reserves. The switch feels like taking a blow directly to the diaphragm. Fuck, he gasps, free hand slamming onto the ground to keep himself steady as the pull of energy grows jagged and painful, chakra being yanked out of his body by the seal. Sensei. Sakura sounds afraid. She's right to be. Somewhere in the transition between the vessel and his own reserves, Sasuke has dropped to the ground at the center of the seal, breathing going suddenly shallow. His eyes are vacant and his skin is growing paler by the moment. Kakashi may not be a medical expert, but he's seen enough severely injured people to recognize the symptoms of shock. The curse mark twists almost gleefully, its claws digging further into Sasuke's system. Fuck, he says again, and the fear must bleed into his voice because Sakura, 13 years old and still somehow always the person he ends up leaning on in these moments, shouts. What do you need, sensei? Kakashi feels like the marrow is being forcibly extracted from his bones, but he manages to gasp out a response. More chakra. The curse mark isn't gone. Vessel's broken and I'm being drained too fast. It's true. Kakashi is no slouch when it comes to chakra reserves, but at the rate the contravene seal is burning through him, both he and Sasuke will be dead in less than a minute. Take mine. That's Naruto, scarlet-eyed and bleeding with chakra brighter than the sun. His voice is part growl as it rushes from between sharpened canines, and two tails flick with agitation along the bamboo flooring behind him. If only the solution were that easy. I can't, Kakashi grits out. Your chakra is too unstable right now and too high density normally anyway. I couldn't use it without a conduit. Kakashi feels his heart rate increase again, dangerously fast now as the flow to the seal pulls at him. I can be the conduit. Sakura's voice is strong but rife with desperation. Maybe she can see the pulse jumping in his neck, the shake in his pale hands. No. It's harder than you know, and your control is impressive but not that good. I've done it before, sensei. In the apothecary with Naruto. Not for the fox's chakra. Kakashi gasps and nearly collapses as the seal bends and crackles, a new aspect of its design awakening to counteract movement from within the curse mark. Sasuke, still on the floor, arches, and lets out a weak, heart-breaking sound of pain. I can do it, sensei. Sakura exclaims again, and Kakashi glances to the side at her, his vision swimming with black dots and the crackling fuzz of chakra. She stares back at him, that spark of determination he's seen over and over has grown, bloomed into a forest fire. He believes her. And he doesn't have any other options. Go, he spits out, and it's the only confirmation she needs. The pinkette turns to Naruto and shouts, try to keep your chakra flow steady and tell Kurama we may need his help. Then she reaches out and grabs Kakashi's shoulder with one hand and Naruto's forearm with the other. It's like lighting a barrel of gunpowder under Kakashi's nose, in which Naruto is the gunpowder and Sakura is the spark. Kakashi's faltering system is suddenly awash in concentrated, searing energy. He feels like a shallow stream bed that's had an entire ocean emptied into it, like a flea trying to rein a giant boar. The light of the seal changes again, lightning white to fiery orange in less than a breath. He barely registers Sakura dropping to her knees beside him, her teeth grinding together and muscles locking with pain. He turns slightly to look, suddenly remembering that the chakra she is feeding him is the stabilized version of whatever she's drawing from Naruto. The Sharingan focuses on her face just as blood begins to run from Sakura's nose. She meets his worried gaze with eyes glazed in pain. Sensei, focus. That's Naruto, wreathed in light and crouched with an arm behind Sakura's shoulders, helping keep her steady even as his chakra scalds through her body. Kakashi nods once and returns his gaze to the contravene seal. Sasuke is still collapsed at the center. They are in the final stages now, the most critical ones, and if he can't finish this soon he's not sure Sakura will be able to remain conscious, if he'll be able to remain conscious. Kakashi locks onto the chakra, 1 part the golden light of Naruto and 3 parts snarling, burning nine tails. He doesn't know if the Kyuubi is willingly offering its power in this endeavor, but Kakashi won't look a gift fox in the mouth, and so he slings the roiling energy into the matrix before him. He steadies the flow, deepens its hold and its density, and pushes. He feels the curse mark grow, afraid, and doesn't fight the feral smile that slashes across his face. They are winning. The black dots at the corners of his vision are growing, as is the roaring in his ears. Sakura is still upright, but her grip is shaking against his shoulder, her fingers digging so hard into him that he can feel the spidery cracks of fractures beginning to race through the bones of his shoulder. Naruto is radiating anxiety next to her, but his energy isn't faltering in the least. Sasuke is still breathing, even if it's shallow and too fast. But they are winning. Kakashi buries the pain and the worry. Wielding a deluge of chakra like a scythe, he activates the final interior ring of the seal, sending a jolt of power into the deepest recesses of Sasuke's chakra system and incinerating the last reaching tendrils of the curse mark. Only the corrupting thing's heart is left now. Kakashi pools energy, carefully maintaining the steady flow of the rest of the seal at the same time. He gathers chakra, building it like he would for a Chidori, only 100 times more concentrated. The chakra of the nine tails flowing through his veins feels like a star is being born in the center of his chest. His vision is only a pinhole now, consciousness hanging on by a thread. This last thing. Do this last thing and you can rest, Kakashi tells himself. He thinks he feels Sakura hit the ground next to him, but it's okay. He has enough chakra swimming through his veins to finish this. Surging to his feet as the world narrows around him, Kakashi takes 3 long strides to the center of the seal. He drops to his knees and, with a hand coated in chakra dense enough to burn through solid steel, Kakashi slams his palm against the side of Sasuke's neck where the last weak black outlines of Orochimaru's touch remain. He drives the energy home like he would a kunai through an enemy's chest. The curse mark shatters under his hand. Kakashi barely registers colliding with the ground. He thinks he can hear Naruto shouting, but his eyes are so heavy and his chakra is all but gone. Just a few minutes of rest and he'll check on his kids, he thinks, surrendering to the darkness that wraps around him with all-encompassing arms. Just a few minutes. Chapter 8, No more questions, no more lies. When Kakashi regains consciousness, it's to the sight of worried hazel eyes peering down at him and the smell of ink and strong coffee tickling his nose. "Oh good," says the figure above him, tucking a soft-looking strand of brown hair behind an ear, "you're awake. I was worried I would have to take you to the hospital with how much chakra you depleted." Kakashi stares at Amino Irika as the Chunin settles back on his heels. The Jonin is out of his depth. The last thing he remembers is the scalding feeling of the curse mark shattering under his palm. After that there is nothing. He's clearly been moved to the living room, back resting against the worn familiar rug and the old couch the kids crash on after their long days of training just to his left. "Irika," Kakashi manages to croak, "the kids." The brown-haired man smiles gently at him. Kakashi has always thought that Irika had an exceptionally pretty smile. A very nice ass too. Ah, that would be the chakra exhaustion talking, he supposes. Irika is saying something, so Kakashi blinks and tries to focus. And Naruto and Sakura are sleeping with him. I thought about separating them to different beds at least, but they seem happy all piled together like that, and I assumed that Sasuke would want his team close. Sakura isn't unconscious anymore, just exhausted. She does have some burns from the chakra she channeled, but I was able to heal those at least a bit. Naruto was worked up considering he ran all the way to my apartment after you all blacked out, but he's fine otherwise. So they are okay? Kakashi says, needing to be sure. Yes, Hei-take-san, they are fine. Kakashi breathes out a long slow breath. He hasn't fucked it up yet. They're still alive. Attempting to regain some control over the situation, he says, "Sensei, you know I've told you to call me Kakashi." He's grateful for the mask that hides most of his face, as he's certain the grin he tries to send the school teacher's way ends up more grimace than anything. Normally he'd tack on some other flirty comment just to enjoy the pretty blush that paints Irika's tan cheeks when he does, but he still feels like he got run over by a whole pack of Ninkin or perhaps punched in the face by guys, so he leaves it alone for now. The floor feels nice, Kakashi thinks, closing his eyes for a second. Laying down feels nice. When Kakashi opens his eyes again, after what he could have sworn was only a few moments, Iruka is leaning over his space with a cup of something sweet-smelling. He tilts the straw towards Kakashi. Drink. Sugar helps replenish chakra quicker. Kakashi makes a face. I'm not one of your kids, Iruka-sensei, he says, aiming for a firm tone and landing on petulant instead. Kakashi hates being babied. No, Iruka says serenely, but you are Naruto's sensei and a fellow ninja, so I feel an obligation to you, and honestly, if I have to drag your skinny ass all the way to the hospital because you were too stubborn to drink some juice, then I'm going to shred every single shoddy mission report you've turned in for the past year and make you eat them. Kakashi blinks. Hot. Kakashi's mouth says before his brain can approve. What? Kakashi chooses to cut his losses where he can and without another word takes the juice from Iruka. The 23-year-old's eyes are still narrowed at him and a pink flush dusts across his tan skin, but Kakashi thinks he's in the clear. He finishes the juice and sets it to the side to flop back bonelessly against the floor of the living room. He buries a flinch of pain as he jostles what are most likely some minor fractures in his shoulder from where Sakura was grabbing him. Gods, she is getting strong. Iruka is still watching him, hands twisting in a gesture reminiscent of Naruto's own nervous energy. So when are the four of you leaving the village? He asks. The breath freezes in Kakashi's lungs. Iruka continues, glancing to the side like he's asking about an awkward date, not treason. It wasn't particularly hard to figure out, you know. You should be more careful. Naruto isn't very good at keeping secrets, and the training you've been having him and Sakura doing is fairly obviously not combat but survival-oriented and dash. Hound rips himself off the floor and slams into Iruka faster than the other can even register he's in danger. He flips them both over, pinning Iruka down roughly against the ground, his legs on either side of the shocked Chiryunin's hips. He expertly ignores the way his head spins at the sudden movement and the quiet little sound of shock that escapes Iruka's mouth. He whips out a kunai and rests it underneath the schoolteacher's jaw, razor-sharp edge held against his jugular like a promise. Who else knows? Hound asks him, nearly gentle, but radiating with deadly intent. Iruka is staring, those bright hazel eyes wide with surprise and faint fear. To Hound's shock, the schoolteacher's expression shifts suddenly and Iruka bares his teeth at him, straining up into the blade of the kunai and Kakashi's hips holding him down. He growls back, "You think so little of me, Kakashi? Think I'd sell out Naruto like that? He's as good as a son to me. And you are a ninja loyal to the leaf and the Hokage above all," Hound counters, voice dead. "Why else would you come here and wave your knowledge in my face? It's a threat, plain and simple. Kakashi is going to have to kill another friend. He'll do it to keep the kids safe," but looking at the thin line of blood that appears along Iruka's neck as he holds the smaller man down under his blade, tears at something in his heart that was already so shriveled and broken that he's surprised it can still be hurt at all. Iruka has the gall to roll his eyes at the murderous Jonin above him. Kakashi has always known the Chunin to be unreasonably brave, but it still surprises him. "You absolute idiot." Iruka boldly locks his gaze with Obito's Sharingan. Kakashi was barely even conscious of uncovering it. "I'm not here to betray you or the kids. I'm here to offer my help." Kakashi blinks at him. "Your help? Well, that and to keep you from dying of chakra exhaustion, you self-sacrificing bastard, but yes, my help." The school teacher responds with a glare. Kakashi doesn't remove the kunai from where it's pressed against Iruka's throat, but he doesn't kill the man either. "How could you possibly help?" Iruka is still not looking away from Kakashi's eyes. "By feeding you information from inside the village. I'm close to the Hokage, and working at the mission desk means I am privy to the coming and goings of nearly all active Leaf Ninja. I'd be able to tell you who was being sent after you when you run, maybe even keep you ahead of what information they can glean on you and the kids." Kakashi is thunderstruck. What Iruka is offering would be a game changer. Team 7 would go from being a lame rabbit barely dodging the snapping teeth of the hounds at its heels to a hawk able to fly out of reach, or perhaps a snake that can disappear into the foliage. But only if Iruka isn't lying to him. The Chiryunin must read the indecision in his silence because he arches his neck, leaving everything bared to the knife. With Kakashi so chose, killing him would be easier than breathing. Use your Sharingan to confirm that I'm telling you the truth if you have to, or slit my throat right here, Kakashi. He emphasizes Kakashi's name, defiantly reminding Kakashi that only moments ago the Jonin had been arguing that he and Iruka were friends. Brave, stupid, infuriating Chiryunin, Kakashi thinks. God save him from ninja who seemed to believe that he was still a good person. Kakashi leans in so close that his eyes must be the only thing that Iruka can see, their breath intermingling in the space between them. He searches his face, the Sharingan dissecting and memorizing every flex and tick of Iruka's muscles, every flicker of emotion in his gaze. It would be almost romantic, he muses, if not for the blade in his hands. Say it again. Swear to me that you aren't trying to betray us. This close Kakashi can just make out the tiniest flecks of gold in Iruka's eyes. I swear on my parents' graves that I do not intend to betray you or the genin of Team 7. I want to help. He's telling the truth, Kakashi realizes, dissecting the micro-expressions in the fierce look that accompanies Iruka's words. Gods help him, this school teacher fully intends to commit treason and help Team 7 defect. Why? You don't even know why we are leaving, Kakashi manages. Iruka doesn't even hesitate. No, but I know Naruto well enough to understand that whatever it is that's making you all run must be bad enough to separate him from his dream of becoming Hokage. And, Iruka pauses, studying Kakashi just as intently as the Jonin is studying him. Despite your shitty mission reports and habit of reading porn in public, I trust your judgment, Kakashi-san. I know you want what's best for Naruto and Sasuke and Sakura. If that's leaving the village. He breathes out slowly, a flicker of fear breaking through the determination in his gaze, then I have to believe that you have a very good reason for doing so. Kakashi just stares for several long beats before finally choking out, what did I say about all that honorifics nonsense, Iruka-sensei? Iruka offers him a smile that gives Naruto's brightness a run for its money. Well, you best just call me Iruka then, Kakashi. It seems we'll be committing treason together after all. Right, says Kakashi and, realizing that he's still literally on top of the other man with a blade to his throat, flushes under his mask. Twirling the kunai around his finger, Kakashi reholsters the blade and sits back on his heels, offering a hand to pull Iruka off the old carpet where he'd pinned him. The young man takes it with a smile and as he's sitting up unfolds his other hand to show Kakashi a paper seal that he had tucked away in his palm. A banshee seal? Kakashi says in surprise after studying the dark blue lines of ink for a few moments. He gives the Chunin an impressed look. That, plus a few simple modifications of my own, Iruka responds, lifting his free hand to rub humbly at the back of his neck. I'm really glad I didn't have to use it. It always makes my ears ring for weeks after. I didn't even notice you had palmed it, Kakashi offers, and honestly, he hadn't. Iruka had somehow armed himself, stealthily and effectively, between when Kakashi had lunged and collided with him. Ah, that's cause I had it in my sleeve the whole time, Iruka corrects mildly. Kakashi blinks. I teach dangerous, hyperactive children all morning and deal with deadly, hair-trigger ninjas all evening. Did you think I haven't had someone jump me like that before? Kakashi, actually really didn't. Rolling his eyes, the brunette reaches to his collar and pulling his mesh shirt aside a few inches reveals a pale star-shaped scar just under his left collarbone. Hound's half of Kakashi's consciousness provides, stab wound. Tonto or kunai most likely. Healed by a medic, not naturally. Ragged edges, so it was either dealt with an unsteady hand or he struggled against his attacker. Collarbone. Freckles, pretty, offers the other, significantly less helpful half. Ouch. Kakashi says weakly. Yep. Iruka returns brightly. A jonin broke while he was turning in his report to me at the mission desk. I guess I moved too quickly grabbing the approval stamp because he vaulted the desk and stabbed me. Luckily I had a knockout seal on me and I managed to take him down before anyone else got hurt. Kakashi suddenly very badly wants to know the name of the jonin in question. So he can have some friendly words with the other ninja. Maybe remind him about protocol regarding mental stability after taxing missions. Maybe break his arm for hurting the sweetly smiling Chunin in front of him. It really wasn't that bad, Kakashi, Iruka says with a grin. Apparently Kakashi hasn't managed to keep the ugly streak of protectiveness off his face as much as he hoped. Damned Inyazuka instincts. The school teacher continues, tucking the banshee seal away. A little intense in the moment for sure, but in the grand scheme of things a tiny scar is worth the chance to remind all you lazy jonin that my bite is just as dangerous as my bark. Iruka winks at him and Kakashi is instantly blushing again like a preteen. God, he hates his pale complexion sometimes. Iruka laughs at him, the sound rich and bright. Kakashi can count on one hand the number of people who've had the nerve to laugh at him in the past year, and a majority of them are in the building with him currently. Kakashi is suddenly hit by the fact that he has an ally. An ally who is an adult ninja and not a giant, demon fox. That's to say, I really. Iruka raises an eyebrow at his stumbling words, smile turning gentle and warm at the edges. You're welcome, Kakashi. I know you must have been very overwhelmed the past couple weeks. Kakashi nods weakly and resists the urge to shun Shin out of the room in a desperate bid to preserve his ego even a little bit. He's going to blame this entire series of exchanges on the chakra exhaustion and no one can stop him. There are a few beats of silence before Iruka asks, tentative again in a way that doesn't fit his bright fierceness at all. You're absolutely sure that you all are leaving? Kakashi has been unsuccessfully asking that question himself for what feels like every waking moment of the past 3 weeks, so he's surprised by how easily the answer comes now. I'm sure, Iruka. Team 7 was hellbent on leaving the moment we found out what really goes on in the shadows of this village. The brown-haired Chiryunin digests this for several beats and then nods. He doesn't ask for more details, which Kakashi is grateful for, and instead simply inquires, so, what comes next? You've got Sasuke's curse mark off, Sakura's stamina is easily 5 times what it was, and Naruto seems to have grown fairly adept at leading that Sannin pervert around the village on a wild goose chase. When do you all leave? What else needs doing? How can I help? Kakashi takes a few moments to pull his eyes away from the tan strip of skin showing where Iruka's collar hasn't quite laid back flat and forces his mind onto the mission. What's left is we rest and then run. We're leaving the morning of the Chiryunin exam finals in 6 days, he says simply. It feels impossible that the day is so soon, but he has to accept that he's made all the preparations he can. Oh, and set the bombs, he adds, almost as an afterthought. Iruka's eyebrows tick up. Bombs. Non-lethal? Probably. They were Sakura's idea. We're using them to muddy the water a bit and give us a head start. Iruka nods slowly. It's a good idea, though it's going to immediately bump up the threat categorization they place you under once you're marked as rogue. Kakashi scoffs out a bitter laugh and leans back on his hands, letting his still swimming vision rove about the dingy living room. Iruka, even if we leave muffin baskets for every Demumbu and send a spa package to Hiruzen himself, we're going to be marked as S-rank missing in the moment we step out those gates. Well, that's just pessimistic. Iruka starts with a frown. He's a Jinchuriki, Iruka. The school teacher freezes, a stricken look sliding across his face as he glances down the hallway towards where the kids are sleeping peacefully. Where Naruto sleeps peacefully. I had forgotten what exactly that means. To me, he's just Naruto. You know. He murmurs. Kakashi does know. When the blonde is whining about early mornings or begging for ramen for dinner or laughing with Sakura and Sasuke, it's so easy for him to become just a 13-year-old boy in Kakashi's mind. But he's not to the rest of the world and the powerful players that run it. Politics-wise, Naruto is nearly incomparably valuable. The strongest of the Baijuyu, young, impressionable and untethered by family, he's a weighty piece in the tentative balance of power constantly shifting between the major elemental nations. He's a weapon of mass destruction. Luckily, Kakashi thinks, looking at the fearful gaze Iruka directs towards where his student is sleeping soundly, Naruto has another weapon in his corner. Hound may be rusted and bent, but he's easily one of the most dangerous men in the shinobi world, and he won't fail again in protecting what's precious to him. Hey, he says quietly, placing a placating hand on Iruka's shoulder, I'll keep him safe. I'll keep them all safe. Iruka turns fierce hazel eyes on him again and he responds resolutely. You will, and I'm going to help. Kakashi gives the man the most genuine smile he can, even with a headache spiking from the chakra exhaustion and regular, bone-deep exhaustion setting in. Irika smiles back and then, hopping up from where he's been sat on the floor, says cheerfully, "Right then. I'm going to go get you some more juice, and I'm going to get a cup of the blackest coffee I can wrangle out of that dinky old pot in your kitchen, and then you are going to walk me through your plans." "Why don't I get coffee?" Kakashi doesn't mean to be whining again, but his head hurts and everything is still fuzzy at the edges and he doesn't want juice. The look Irika gives him, all bright, eviscerating smile and lovely eyes that promise pain, is the same one that has sent more than one Jonin fleeing from the mission desk. Because, dear Kakashi, you have chakra exhaustion, and also you waited until you nearly killed yourself with said chakra exhaustion less than a week before you defected from the most powerful ninja village in the world with my basically adopted son to let me in the loop. So I will help you go over your plans until they are rock solid, and I will drink your coffee and you will get juice. Kakashi watches mournfully as Irika spins on his heels and strides off towards his kitchen. How can someone so cruel have such a glorious ass, he wonders, and flops back on the floor. Sasuke wakes up feeling like he's been stabbed multiple times in every inch of his skin. Each breath burns in his chest and nausea turns his stomach. He hurts everywhere. But the curse mark is gone. He carefully feels along his chakra pathways, searching for the black creeping energy of Orochimaru's influence. There is nothing, only the steady thrum of his own chakra. He breathes, strained and aching, but for the first time in nearly a month, his body is his own. The Uchiha opens his eyes to find himself in a large bed with warm and rumpled sheets. This is the room Kakashi has been sleeping in for the past several weeks. Sasuke isn't alone. His gaze finds Sakura first, curled into a ball near his side, bandages visible on her arms and peeking out from under her shirt. Naruto is sprawled out like a starfish on his other side, snoring softly, one arm on top of Sasuke's chest and a leg laying atop his hip, as if the blonde is worried Sasuke will disappear if he doesn't have a hand on him. They are both sound asleep. Sasuke activates the Sharingan, immediately relieved again at the lack of the curse mark's toxic presence, and looks over his teammates. They are okay. They are tired, and Sakura definitely has several serious burns that Sasuke feels a pulse of concern over, but they are okay. All three of them are. He curls a fist tight as emotion rushes through his chest. They've made it over the first major hurdle together. Sasuke carefully, slowly, pushes himself off the bed and out from under his sprawling teammate. Naruto grumbles worriedly in his sleep but doesn't wake, and Sakura remains dead to the world even when Naruto reaches a hand to grasp subconsciously at her wrist. 3 weeks ago, Sasuke would have been violently jealous at the gesture. Now though, he just feels vaguely fond as he watches them resting. His team. He ducks out of the room on quiet, somewhat unsteady feet. Following the nearly imperceptible sound of sleeping breaths, he pokes ahead into the living room to be greeted by the sight of Irika Umino and Kakashi sprawled together on the floor. They are surrounded by nearly a dozen open scrolls and several empty cups and mugs. Irika is tilted with his head against Kakashi's shoulder, the ratty blanket from the couch wrapped around his shoulders. He's drooling softly on Kakashi's shirt as he sleeps. His sensei seems to be asleep as well, one arm up on the couch he's leaning against, conveniently draped across Irika's strong shoulders. He has dark circles under his eyes and his hair is an even bigger mess than normal, but he seems unharmed too. Sasuke wrinkles his nose, unsure about what it means that Irika is here. If Kakashi is okay and isn't worried about it though. He turns to leave and a quiet voice breaks the near silence of the compound. Sasuke. He turns back. Kakashi's eye is open, studying him carefully even as he holds perfectly still to avoid rousing Irika. Are you alright? The Jonin whispers. Sasuke nods and then responds just as quietly, sore and drained, but the mark is definitely gone. Kakashi nods and some tension seems to seep from his shoulders. At the subtle movement, Irika gives a sleepy mumble and burrows closer, one arm coming up to lay across Kakashi's chest. Sasuke raises an eyebrow at his sensei. Kakashi, to Sasuke's complete bafflement, blushes slightly. Don't say shit unless you want me pointing out the way Naruto was wrapped around you when you were asleep, Kakashi whispers fiercely at him. Sasuke glowers back, pretending the flush that creeps across his own face is annoyance or perhaps feverishness after the removal of the curse mark. Instead of risking Kakashi saying more embarrassing things about him and Naruto, Sasuke inclines his head towards Iruka. He's with us. Kakashi nods. Sasuke doesn't trust it. Are you sure you aren't being manipulated into trusting him? He pushes, pointedly looking at the way Kakashi's body is angled towards the sleeping Chunin, his hand gently resting on the smaller man's upper arm. I held a kunai against his throat and threatened him with the Sharingan, and he swore to me on his parents' graves and then called me an idiot for not trusting him sooner. He's genuine, the Jonin says, and maybe his defenses have gotten lower around them, or maybe Sasuke has just gotten better at reading his sensei because the baffled fondness in his face is clear as can be. I hope you're right, Sasuke murmurs back and then grabs another blanket off the armchair near him and tosses it to Kakashi smoothly. The Jonin catches it without moving his shoulder or jostling his companion so much as an inch. So you don't strain your neck sleeping like that? Sasuke offers as nonchalantly as possible, and then without waiting for a response ducks back down the hallway to his team. He hopes that Kakashi can understand the thank you for what it is, even though he doesn't say it aloud. Chapter 9, All My Wolves. The day before the final stage of the Chunin exams dawns bright and cool. The first twinges of fall are making themselves known in the land of fire, and Sakura appreciates them with all her heart for the ease that they give her morning run. She's honestly come to look forward to her early workouts. It's a time for her to be alone, to sort and order her increasingly spinning thoughts. Today more than ever she needs the time to process through her anxieties. They leave tomorrow. In less than 24 hours Team 7 will be defecting from the village hidden in the leaves. It's been her reality for almost a month now, and it still feels like an impossibility. Maybe it will feel more real when they've actually passed through the gates for the last time. Maybe it won't. Sakura rounds the west side of the wall, her breaths coming steady and sure and her muscles burning pleasantly. She's not pushing it today for obvious reasons. Iruka-sensei had suggested last night that she take the morning off entirely. Kakashi had nearly fallen off his chair laughing at the look she had sent her former academy teacher at the mere idea. It's not that she doesn't see the importance of rest in becoming stronger, or the wisdom in making sure her energy stores are full for what is certainly going to be a tense and high-stakes trek to the east when they run. It's just that waking up before the rest of her team to run and stretch and build her muscles like she has been for 28 days now has become something of a security blanket for her. It calms her and allows her to feel her feet under her. Lets her see the path ahead of her, emotionally as much as physically. It reminds her that she's not the same Sakura who declared her reason for becoming a ninja as love for a boy, or even the same one who cut her hair in the forest of death. She's becoming something new and sharp and dangerous. Who would have thought 3 weeks ago that she'd turn out to be a jock like Lee or Guy-sensei? The comparison makes her blanch slightly, and she pumps her arms a bit faster to escape the image of how dreadfully her pink hair would clash with a green jumpsuit. As she rounds the crest of one of the low-lying hills just outside the walls of the village, the sun begins to break over the tops of Konoha's signature massive trees, casting light against her face in golden rays. It's the one thing she'll miss most about the village, the sunrise over the trees, and she only appreciated it fully in her last month here. Suddenly, a shiver trails up her spine, disrupting her peaceful contemplation. A prickle on the back of her neck says she's not alone. Umino Iruka was at the Haytake compound again last night, comes a drawl from the branches above her. Sakura's thundering heart drops to her stomach and her mind kicks instantly into overdrive. She stops and looks up slowly, consciously keeping her muscles from locking in stress. Shikamaru is perched in a tree above the path she's jugged dozens of times now, grinning down at her crookedly. "Are you following me?" Sakura asks, aiming for confusion. The anger slips into her tone without her say-so. The Nara drops from the tree and lands in front of her on the dusty trail, his hands in his pockets. "I am." "Why?" She bites out. He shrugs. "I'm bored, and secrets interest me." "Will you deny that you're hiding something?" He doesn't say. Sakura hears it anyway. "A person's private business isn't a secret," she says primly, switching personas. "If clueless girl wouldn't work, then maybe stick in the mud would." His grin widens. "We're ninja, there is no such thing as private in this business, but kudos for effort." "Fucker. If I tell you, will you just leave me alone?" She tries, blushing and lowering her eyes, fingers twisting around each other nervously. "I'll listen to whatever lie you make up, sure, but if you try and convince me that this is something to do with your love for Sasuke, then I'm going to be disappointed because predictable much." Sakura drops her hands and the flustered act as well, glaring at the dark-haired boy in front of her. "Don't break his nose, don't break his nose," Sakura commands herself. He's still smirking at her. "Fine then." She turns and starts to walk away, back the way she came. Discretion is the better part of valor, retreat is the better part of outclassed and disadvantaged. Sakura is smart. She is smart and ruthless and determined and conniving. But Shikamaru is a genius. She takes 3 steps and then jolts to a stop, her shadow bound to the ground as if by a 1,000,000-ton weight. Any hope she had of this being a passing interest to the Nara dies on the dusty ground where a thin strip of chakra-manipulated shadow connects her to him. She can't see his expression from where he's caught her, but his voice is clear. "Let's lay our tiles on the table." The shadow possession jutsu moves her body without her say-so, pacing to the side and turning so she can see him, parallel from her and watching her in the same way she is him. "Here's what I know," he continues, "Team 7 has, for unstated reasons, all moved from their previous dwellings into the once abandoned Heitake family lands. Sasuke Uchiha forfeited his place in the Chunin exams and has since been completely absent from the village. Naruto Uzumaki is spending his days avoiding Jiraiya of the Sannin, who arrived a little over a week ago now. He also seems to have developed a strange cough that affects his vocal cords, basic speech patterns, eye color, and personality at random times. Kakashi Heitake has gone from vaguely bored Jonin legend and shitty teacher to completely exhausted and devoted sensei. He's hiding the exhaustion well, but the signs are still there. He's also become an avid book reader, considering the number of times the Chunin staffing the village archives told me they have seen him in the past fortnight. Iruka-sensei has visited the Heitake compounds every night for the past 3 days, each time carrying scrolls. He's more obviously worn down than Heitake, nervous on his mission desk shifts and more snappish in class. He pauses, lets Sakura breath through the damning stream of information. And Sakura Harino, he steps closer, forcing her to mirror him. He doesn't stop until they are less than a foot apart. He looks down the few inches that separate them in height, studying her face. For the first time, Sakura lets the full extent of the anger and helplessness she's feeling wash over her expression. He doesn't even have the decency to look surprised. Sakura Harino has gone from annoying and empty-headed fangirl, to a kunoichi that trains every single morning and ignores long-time rivalries in favor of befriending teammates she once hated and revered in turn but didn't truly care for. She's broken ties with her family after literally breaking her father's arm. She lies on instinct and is wary of anyone smart enough to look past the impressive but not impenetrable mask she's donned. She, and her whole team, are hiding something, and she's taken it on herself to keep their secret. Sakura feels like throwing up. Sakura feels like punching him in the throat for ever thinking she was empty-headed. Sakura feels, more defyingly, like hugging him for seeing how smart and capable she is now. And that's about it, Shikamaru says, studying her closely. This is her fault. She wasn't convincing enough in the shop, and now everything is about to unravel in her hands. She tests the bonds of the shadow possession jutsu, desperately, and finds a fraction of give. She doesn't let so much a flicker of hope cross her face. "So," she says instead, anger hot and heavy and genuine on her tongue. "What has the great Shikamaru deduced then? What is the oh-so-important secret of Team 7? The genius continues looking at her, considering for several long moments. Sakura maintains eye contact and at the same time slowly, so slowly, reaches her fingers into her sleeve and grabs the senbon she's taken to keeping tucked there, just in case, a more deadly version of the trick learned from Iruka-sensei. She feels sick as her skin touches the metal. Shikamaru's eyes are still on her face, almost childlike in their enjoyment of what he sees as the final moves of a game and not the life and death of people she cares about. If he's figured them out, she will do her utmost to see those bright eyes go dull and lifeless. She will protect her team even if it means killing someone she would have once called a comrade. Shikamaru hums, considering her question. Sakura's fingers tighten around the senbon. "I think that Team 7 was given a high-profile assassination mission by the Hokage, an S rank. Sakura staunchly refuses to let herself sag in relief, but she releases her grip on the senbon instantly. Probably some foreign dignitary that will be here when the Chunin exam starts. Such as Gaara of the Sand perhaps. He looks gleefully smug with his own clever deductions. Sakura blinks sharply, following his logic and nearly unable to believe her luck. He continues unaware. It's definitely something that they need Sasuke for, because why else would he have thrown that match? They want him and Kakashi to be able to move freely while you and Naruto draw eyes during the tournament. A genin will elicit less suspicion than anyone else, even one with skills like Sasuke's. It's a perfect setup really. Iruka must be helping with information gathering or profiling, considering his work with young ninja at the academy. It explains the confrontation in the apothecary as well. Gaara is an unstable Jinchuriki, a loose weapon, and so the Hokage has assigned the team with members that can match him in power like Naruto and also outmaneuver him with the Sharingan. They've probably loosened the bonds on the Kyuubi no Kitsune so that Naruto can match Gaara's power if things go badly, which would explain his red eyes and the instability of his chakra. Sakura doesn't nod, doesn't so much as move for fear that Shikamaru will realize that he's off the mark. It feels too good to be true, but as long as he thinks that he's got them figured out, then Team 7 is, maybe not safe, but maybe not completely fucked. What I don't get, she can't help but tense again, is why you are so worried about me specifically finding out about it. He's watching her face so intently that Sakura actually flushes under the scrutiny. He raises an eyebrow at the red on her cheeks but graciously doesn't comment. She can't lie. He's proven as discerning as someone with the Sharingan on that front. You are good at deducing things and I made a promise to see this through, she tells him, the determination clear even in the half-truths rolling off her tongue. If we get found out, the whole thing gets 1,000 times more dangerous. I won't let them down like that. Let him think her promise was to the village and her fear was of the Gaara or the Sand Village. Let him think whatever he wants if it means she doesn't have to put the needle tucked up her sleeve through his eye. He nods, seemingly satisfied. The shadow possession jutsu drops and Shikamaru steps back from her. He lifts a hand to rub at the back of his neck and rolls his eyes skyward. Honestly Sakura, I'm a loyal ninja to the leaf, you know? I wouldn't betray a mission like this, especially in S rank. I'm glad you aren't going around talking about it, but there is no reason to be so paranoid either. She just nods, afraid that even a quiver in her voice will upset the whole delicate balance. There are several beats of awkward silence. How are the preparations going? She has no idea why he's still talking to her. She wishes he would stop talking to her. Fine, but we are all feeling a little apprehensive about tomorrow. Sasuke is still recovering from some pretty bad exhaustion from the second stage of the Chunin exams and Naruto is dealing with a lot of stress. Kakashi has his hands full juggling all of us. She doesn't quite manage to be cheerful or even friendly, but he wouldn't have bought it if she did. Once again he nods, the misdirecting truths passing whatever sense or perceptiveness allows him to read everyone with such terrifying insight. Well, I wish you all luck then. If you had asked me when we graduated, Team 7 would be the last I picked for a mission like this, between you and the dead last and sad boy Sasuke, but dash. Sakura buries her anger at the nicknames under a wave of determination. But after this? Seeing how strong you've all gotten? How hard I had to work to figure out what was going on. To figure you out specifically? That says something. You guys are going to take this mission by storm. And he cocks that smirky little half-smile at her, and for a moment, Sakura actually smiles back. It feels good, being recognized by someone outside of her team for how hard she's been trying, especially by Shikamaru, who had never once looked at her as anything less than an annoyance before this. Even if he's completely off the mark with what's going on, he can see that they've gotten stronger, that she has gotten stronger. She lifts an arm to fiddle nearly subconsciously with a piece of pink hair that's come loose from her bun, and the senbon in her sleeve jostles at the movement, pressing cold and sharp and deadly against her skin. The satisfaction she was feeling promptly dies. She cannot for even a moment forget the stakes here. There are more lives than just her team's that rest in her hands. Thank you, Shikamaru, she says quietly. Please, please keep this between us. If you don't, my team might die, she doesn't say. He hears it anyway. You can trust me, Sakura, he says with another crooked smile. She can't. They look at each other for several long moments. The genius and the liar. I have to finish my run now. She points behind him down the path in the direction of the main gate. He gestures widely, stepping aside so he's no longer blocking her way, and she moves past him, picking up speed quickly. His dark eyes follow her until she's out of sight. Sakura knows two things with absolute certainty. First, she knows that for now, Team 7 is safe, at least from Shikamaru. Second, she knows that in the broader scheme of Team 7's goals, not only is this little game with Shikamaru far from over, but the win she's just had is a double-edged sword. Everything she knows about the Nara genius spins through her mind. If Sakura had to guess, she would say that Shikamaru's greatest driving force, subconscious or otherwise, is the pursuit of finding something that interests him, that challenges him. He's a loyal ninja to the leaf, a good shinobi, but the teen is always so many steps ahead that even something as exciting as shinobi life probably seems like the reread of a textbook he's already finished several times. His motivations are thus very simple and absolutely impossible to manipulate to her favor in their current scenario. In winning, in outsmarting him and managing to keep Team 7's secrets under wraps, she's just turned them into the most interesting distraction that Shikamaru will likely have ever found. She's guaranteed that the moment he realizes she's beaten him, he'll never give up on pursuing them, if only so he can play again. She should probably be more worried about that than she is. Instead, she feels a heated curl of glee at the prospect. She beat Shikamaru. She, Sakura Harano, outmaneuvered one of the greatest minds in Konoha. Sakura is absolutely positive that this is not the last time she'll be across the metaphorical shogi board from Shikamaru Nara, and she's equally positive that next time he's going to be 100 times more challenging. She can't wait. Suzuki comes and finds him sitting in the breezeway as the afternoon stretches towards evening like a lazy cat. The cool morning has turned into the kind of day characterized by sleepy, yellow heat and the distant hum of waking cicadas. A gentle breeze dispels some of the humid warmth clinging to the air. The humidity may be what allows the plant life of Konoha to grow with such wild abandon and to such towering heights, but it also makes mustering energy on days like these very challenging. Naruto is grateful for the moving air, and for the shade provided by the breezeway. He's going to miss the Haytake lands. In this past month they've come to be the closest he's found yet to something that feels like home. Of course, it's not hard to be better than the shitty little shoebox apartment he lived in, alone, for most of his youth. The Haytake lands are still not right though. It's still not the place he can dig his toes into and set his heart down. Suzuki's footsteps are silent, but Naruto knows he's there anyway. The awareness that's tied them together as long as Naruto can remember purrs to life as soon as the raven-haired boy slips out of the screen doors that lead into the house and pads to rest next to him. Suzuki tucks his feet tucked under him neatly even as Naruto's swing off the porch to brush against the cool green grass. They are silent for many long minutes, watching the shadows grow longer over the central lawn and the air begin to take on the golden quality of evening. Naruto breaks the comfortable silence first. "I sent a message to Gaara," he says without preamble. Suzuki glances at him, one eyebrow ticking up in a silent question. "I know I don't owe him anything just because he's another Jinchuriki, but we're about to leave for good and he's as alone as I was, if not more." And Suzuki waits while Naruto tries to untangle the mess of longing and anger and selfish relief and bone-deep sadness he feels every time he's confronted with the other boy. He deserves to know that there are other options than just being a tool. A chance to decide his own path. "What did you say?" Suzuki asks after a few beats. Naruto wrings his fingers nervously. He may not be as smart as Sakura when it comes to these things, but even he knows that what he wrote in his letter to Gaara is tactically suicide. If the boy decides to turn them in, to give the letter to Bobby or Batty or whatever his sensei's name is, or worse a leaf shinobi, they're as good as dead. "I told him what the leaf did to me and how it was on purpose, and also about Kurama and how I talked to him and the seal, and also about how we're running from the village and also where we intend to go just in case he wanted to come too." He says all in one breath, hoping that maybe this way it's harder for his shocked-looking teammate to be mad about any one part. Suzuki opens his mouth, closes it, glares out across the green lawn of the Haytake courtyard for several long seconds and then, turning his dark piercing eyes to Naruto, simply says, "Okay." Naruto exhales in a rush. This is why he told Sasuke and not Sakura or Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke gets it in a way that they don't, that some things exist outside of strategy or cleverness or the logical choice. He gets that some things are about the threads that bind people together even when you maybe don't want them to. He gets that if you give up on someone, if you don't try to help them, then whatever bad things happen to them happen because of you. He gets that even if he's leaving what has been his home and his dream for the past 13 years, that Naruto can never be the person who doesn't care about others. Sakura will kick your ass if she finds out, Sasuke warns him. Even worse than when I let Pakin chew up her hairbrush, Naruto agrees mournfully. You didn't let him do anything, Dub, you picked it up, looked at him, and said, if I throw this as far as I can you still catch it? Naruto laughs, remembering. Yeah, and he totally did too. Sensei's ninkin are so fucking cool. The small private smile that Sasuke reserves for moments like these appears as he leans back on his hands and closes his eyes. Naruto looks at his profile, the line of his nose, the curl of his hair, the nearly invisible scar at his temple from some childhood accident or other. The shape of his lips. Kurama is still and quiet, but the feeling that hums in Naruto's heart is not unlike the presence of the fox, burning and all-encompassing. See, the thing is that Naruto may not be very book smart, but he gets people. He can listen to someone and really understand where they are coming from, what they're feeling. The longer he spends with someone, the better he understands them, and Naruto has spent a lot of time with himself over his life. He knows himself pretty well. So he knows that he's in love with Sasuke. Really, he's known since the mission to Wave where Sasuke nearly died for him in Haku's ice mirrors. He was probably in love with him before that, but he realized it while holding the other boy in his arms, shaking with fear and listening to his heartbeat slow. It's not like something that keeps Naruto up at night. It's just something that's a part of who he is now. He is 13, he has blonde hair and red eyes, he is a Jinchuriki, his parents are dead and he's in love with Sasuke Uchiha. No reason to make a big fuss out of it as far as he can see, that would be like losing his shit every time the sun rose or he took a piss. And besides, he knows that Sasuke won't ever feel that way about him back. Sasuke is a genius, capable and smart and driven and so beautiful that sometimes it hurts to look at him too closely, and Naruto is just Naruto. He looks for a few moments longer, envious of the golden light for the way it rests against Sasuke's pale eyelids and cheeks and lips. He ends the moment by bumping his shoulder against the other boy. Naruto grins at him when Sasuke cracks open a dark eye to look his way. Wanna go start dinner early so that Sakura can't fuck up the spices in the hot pot? He offers. Hell yes, Sasuke says and rises to his feet gracefully. He offers a pale thin hand to Naruto and without hesitating Naruto reaches and grabs it. He holds it a little tighter than he needs to, a little longer. Sasuke pulls him to his feet and as the dark-haired boy turns and heads towards the doors, Kurama rises to the surface of Naruto's mind. The fox sends him a mixture of fondness/teasing/eye-rolling and murmurs, lovesick fool. Yeah, Naruto agrees easily, and follows Sasuke into the house. And you're sure you've packed enough soldier pills? Kakashi watches with tired but fond amusement as Iruka wears a path in the carpet with his pacing. The Chiryunin has a pen tucked and forgotten in the messy bun that's holding his long hair back and another in his tan fingers tapping nervously against the clipboard he's holding. Yes, Iruka, Kakashi says, not even trying to hide the smile in his voice. And your grab bags and travel clothes are ready to go? And you're positive you've hidden them well enough that no one will have messed with them? He's already asked this question twice over the last 12 hours. I'm positive, Iruka, Kakashi answers anyway. It's nice to have someone worried for them. It helps him tamp down some of his own rising panic at the fact that in approximately 6 hours he and the kids will be stepping out of the village for the last time as loyal shinobi. The schoolteacher reads over the checklist in his hands one more time, eyebrows dipping together in concentration and stress. Kakashi wants to smooth away the wrinkle that forms between the other man's brows. Instead he hops to his feet and snatches the clipboard from Iruka, holding the list over his head when the Chiryunin immediately tries to grab it from him. Kakashi! Give it back, snarls the younger man, but Kakashi just grins at him from behind the mask. Iruka Umino, you've gone over your checklist 3 times today, cross-checked that our primary route is free of scheduled patrols 4 times, and reminded me and the kids no less than 10 times that we need to be resting. Irika, who is standing on his tiptoes and reaching for the clipboard, glares at Kakashi. He is very close. Kakashi can smell the scent of his own shampoo wafting off the other man from when he used Kakashi's shower last night after staying to go over last-minute plans. The possessive, Inuzuka side of him rumbles in pleasure, and Kakashi determinedly stamps it down. His little crush on Irika has become a problem over the past 5 days. Certainly minor compared to the other problems that Kakashi is dealing with, but a problem nonetheless. Even before the madness of this month, Kakashi had thought Irika was interesting and handsome and clever. He had made a nearly subconscious habit of antagonizing the Chiryunin when he happened across Irika on his mission desk shifts, just to enjoy the way the other man would turn red and shout at Kakashi without even a hint of the fear that nearly of their other comrades held when interacting with the infamous Kopinin. But it had always just been that, a chance to fluster a pretty colleague, a passing amusement, a curiosity at a Chiryunin-level school teacher who seemed completely unintimidated by him. Now though, after the past 6 days of having Irika at the compound every spare moment the school teacher could muster, things have shifted. Bumping hips with Kakashi while he made coffee in the kitchen and asking about weather conditions in the Eastern Sea or range for the bombs or the management of Naruto's chakra decay or a million other things, has made Kakashi's previously passing, avoidable crush on Irika a little more present. Using his distracted thoughts to his advantage, Irika snaps a low kick towards Kakashi's stomach, and as Kakashi instinctually brings an arm to block, he feints, and then uses a perfectly balanced flare of chakra to leap into the air and snatch the clipboard back. Kakashi could have stopped him in the grand scheme of things, but he is supposed to be conserving energy, and besides, he'll cherish every opportunity he has left to watch Irika show off some of those easily underestimated skills. That's really why the crush is such a problem. More even than that, Kakashi knows better by now than to invite something as vulnerable as romance into his life. Team 7 is leaving. They are leaving, and Irika, their spy, the greatest advantage they have in their efforts to flee the village, is staying behind. No matter what his little crush might have become given the space to grow, Kakashi has 3 kids to protect from an entire world of those who would see them behind bars or at the end of a sword. He won't risk the gift that is another person on his side just because said person has freckles that scatter across his scarred nose like constellations fading in the first hours of dawn, or eyes that flash emotion without even a whisper of subterfuge, or quick crafty hands with strong tan fingers, or hound tsks at his own foolish softness and locks away the useless wave of melancholic longing right along with the flutter of his heart as Irika glares daggers at him and straightens the papers on his reclaimed clipboard. Kakashi can't afford any distractions right now. "We're ready to go, Irika," he says, softer than he means to. The glare slides from Irika's face and his shoulders droop. Kakashi is reminded again that he's not the only one losing something in Team 7's defection. If anything, his losing out on a chance with the handsome man across from him doesn't even compare to the fact that said man is letting his adoptive son leave the safety of his care to do something that could very easily get him killed. "You've already talked with him?" Kakashi asks, knowing he doesn't really need to clarify for Irika to understand. "Yeah," the schoolteacher says with a bittersweet smile. "He cried like a baby. I did too, honestly. I'm going to miss him terribly, but he swore to me that leaving with you all is what he wants. I would never try and take that from him." Kakashi nods, not trusting that he'd say the right thing if he were to open his mouth at all. "And have you thought about what you'll say when you inevitably get questioned about your presence here this week?" At this Irika's smile turns sly. "Of course. I'll tell them that I was helping out with Naruto and Sakura's preparations for the Chiryunin exams, and if they push for more beyond that..." Kakashi raises an eyebrow, waiting patiently. "I'll just let them think that I was trying to get into your pants." Kakashi's other eyebrow joins the first at his hairline. Irika is steamrolling on, seemingly unaware of the way that Kakashi's face is slowly turning red. "You may be a weird bastard, but no one can deny you're very attractive, and Izumo and Anko have been bugging me about dating for a while and dash." Kakashi cuts him off for the sake of preserving his own sanity. "Right, well, that works I guess." Dragging his thoughts out of the gutter and scraping the multiple versions of "I'd happily let you in my pants" off of his tongue, he instead asks, "You're sure that won't make them more suspicious of you?" They'll already be looking at you as a possible co-conspirator since you're Naruto's guardian. Iruka shrugs. I'm not too worried about it. I'm a good liar and no one is actually going to believe that you would ever return any interest in me anyway, so it won't be a problem. The universe hates Kakashi. It really does. He says, taking the mental box labeled Iruka feelings and shoving it even deeper under the metaphorical floorboards to avoid grabbing the other man's face and explaining in unspoken detail the extent to which Kakashi does, in fact, return interest. You should be worrying about the kids and you anyway, Kakashi. I can take care of myself. He's right, and that's why Kakashi isn't kissing him senseless at the moment. There are a few moments of easy silence, Kakashi standing with his hands in his pocket and Iruka holding the clipboard to his chest. I guess. He eventually offers, I should go. Like you said, you all are ready to leave and me being here will just keep you from resting like you need, and he trails off looking a little lost. Without his say-so, Kakashi's hand reaches and gently takes a stray piece of Iruka's hair that is escaping from where the forgotten pen had been holding it. He tucks it tenderly behind the other man's ear before slipping his hand back into his pocket where he clenches it uselessly. Iruka is watching him with wide hazel eyes. Thank you, Kakashi says, unable to fully articulate how grateful he is to the brunette and knowing that even if he could he wouldn't. Too many dangerous emotions, too much to lose. Iruka nods and smiles softly. I'll wait for one of your summons before sending any messages your way. It's what they agreed on as the safest way to stay in contact for now, using Kakashi's Ninken as couriers. It'll probably be a few weeks at least until I can really send one of them your way, Kakashi reiterates anyway. The Chiryunin nods again, not stepping away. Kakashi doesn't know what the other is waiting for. He wishes that Iruka would just leave before he forgets to be smart. He wishes Iruka would come with them. A few more beats pass and Iruka finally quietly says, Stay safe, Kakashi, and then he presses up onto his tiptoes and brushes the lightest kiss against Kakashi's masked cheek. He turns and leaves without another word. Kakashi needs to take the remaining time he has to sleep, tomorrow is going to be exhausting after all. But instead, he stands sentinel, hands in his pockets and eyes locked where Iruka had stood until the shadows lengthen in the room and the scent of coffee and ink and his shampoo fade from the humid night air. Chapter 10, No Bridges Left to Burn. Genma considers himself a very chill person. After his years on the Lord Fourth's personal guard and all the batshit insane things he saw there, it's pretty hard to ruffle his feathers. This morning though, this fucking morning, has him feeling particularly ruffled. It's not easy to run a ninja village. He knows this. Desk ninjas have the unenviable task of maintaining the bureaucratic monstrosity that is the Leaf. They have to handle assigning and coordinating missions and patrols and guard shifts and a dozen of other tasks that are necessary to keep Konoha secure and strong using a force of nearly 500 active-duty ninja. It's a messy system, and mix-ups happen. He gets it. He sympathizes. But to be put on the graveyard shift on the main gate while he's also supposed to be proctoring the glorified teenage cage match that's going on later this morning? Genma is not fucking pleased. He had tried to get his shift switched around, but the extremely harried-looking Chiryunin at the mission desk had told him, in a very polite and understanding way, to suck it up. So now he's posted at the massive wooden doors that act as the main entrance to Konoha. He's been here since 2 a.m. and he's gonna have to turn around from this shift, go home, shower, put on his best flak jacket, the one without the messy stitching in the back from where an Iwanin tried to stab him in the spine last year, and then hightail it to the Hokage Tower for his briefing on what to expect from the final stages of the Chiryunin exams. He's already tired and grumpy and the sun isn't even up, and he's still got an entire day of playing nanny to a bunch of homicidal preteens trying to out-murder each other ahead of him. God, he needs a drink, or maybe several. The sound of footsteps rouses Genma from where he's been leaning against the stone wall next to the gate. Turning to look, he's greeted with the sight of Jen and Team 7, making their way towards him. They're all dressed in simple workout gear and carrying basic weapons pouches. Genma checks his watch again. Yep, still just past 5 a.m. Kakashi, he calls, lifting an arm in greeting. Your poor Genin must have been puppy murders or something in a past life to deserve getting stuck with you as a teacher. What kind of dickbag sensei drags their kids out of bed at 5 a.m., man? Kakashi rolls his eyes at Genma as they draw nearer. It's just a team run before these two. He drops one gloved hand each onto a pink and blonde head respectively, have their big fights this afternoon. Oh, I'm aware. I got press ganged into Bane the Demmed Proctor, Genma says mournfully. No one said ninjas couldn't whine, okay? Kakashi gives him a sympathetic look. One of his genin, Sakura is her name, Genma thinks, tugs on Kakashi's arm. She looks pale and a little uneasy, Genma notes, all three of the teens do. Probably nerves about their big day, he reasons. Kakashi-sensei, can we get going? I want us to get back with plenty of time to prepare the pinkette cajoles. Kakashi nods to the girl and then says, right Genma, I'll see you around. Something is tugging at Genma's gut. It's barely there, only the barest breath of a thought, but he can't help feeling like something is off. He's not even sure what exactly it is that caught his attention, but he turns and follows with his eyes as Team 7 passes through the boundaries of the main gate. Naruto stops in his tracks just before he takes the final step through, staring at the ground in front of him. Genma watches as Sasuke Uchiha, seemingly realizing that his teammate has frozen in place, reaches back and grabs the blonde boy's hand. Their eyes meet for a moment, an unspeaking intensity to their gazes that Genma doesn't understand. That feeling of wrongness in his gut grows. The Uchiha gives a gentle tug on Naruto's hand and then releases it. Naruto stands still for a moment longer, and then steps forward, clearing the shadowed ground inside the shelter of the gate and following after the backs of Kakashi and Sakura. Genma watches until they disappear into the forest just beyond. The ninja buries a hand in his hair, rubbing at his scalp to try and ease the tension headache that's suddenly building there. Minato had once told Genma that his greatest skills were thinking fast, talking faster, and having the best damn instincts in the elemental nations. At the time Genma had grinned and told his Hokage that it wasn't instincts, just a bastard's luck. Now though he can't help but listen to the quiet warning his gut gives that something major has just happened, something that's going to change everything. Burying his unease, Genma pulls one of his many senbons out and puts it in between his teeth. The Chiryunin he's stationed with gives him a strange look. Genma rolls his eyes and clicks the weapon noisily against his teeth. Gods save him from untested Chiryunin and their strange dedication to standards of conduct and appearances of normalcy. Obviously the other ninja was new to shinobi life if something as simple as Gemma's habit of employing the same weapons he used to kill people as an outlet for his oral fixation registered as strange. Wait till the motherfucker meets Guy, Genma thinks somewhat smugly as he readjusts to lean comfortably against that wall again. Another hour or so passes with Genma entertaining himself by seeing how uneasy he can make his shift partner by twirling a senbon through his fingers. He may not be a full-blown jonin, but Genma's status as a Takubutsu jonin and assassin is still fairly common knowledge, so it's not like the Chiryunin is unreasonable in his discomfort. Most people are just better at hiding it. A fly buzzes through the now lightning dawn air and Genma flicks the senbon between his fingers at it. The insect falls with both its wings precisely impaled on the needle. Target practice, Genma tells the wide-eyed and sweating Chiryunin with a smirk. The man actually flinches at his words and Genma rolls his eyes. Fucking amateurs. Suddenly, the sense of foreboding that Genma had felt earlier returns with a vengeance. He pushes himself up off of the wall, looking around surreptitiously to see if he can spot anything that may be the cause of his unease. Because he's standing, the explosion doesn't quite knock him off his feet. The smell of acrid smoke assaults his nose and the ground vibrates with the strength of the blast as Genma instinctively drops into a crouch. All extraneous thoughts immediately vanish under the brunt of instincts honed by many formative years at war. Brace. He roars at the cowering Chiryunin. He's not sure how he knows more blasts are coming, but he's right all the same. After the first, a second closer and even louder concussion rends the morning air. At least 3 more ring out closely following, but luckily for Genma they are more distant. He's already moving, not waiting for the shocked silence in the aftermath of the attack to break. He leaps to the side of the wall near him where an old but well-maintained seal is carved into the stone. With a chakra-covered palm, Genma slams the center of the matrix. There is a pause before the seal glows white and releases a shrieking alarm. Its deafening sound is picked up rapidly at 2, then 4, then nearly a dozen other locations across the expanse of Konoha. It's a sound Genma hasn't heard in more than 13 years. The Leaf Village is under attack. Genma's mind is already 3 steps ahead. Stay here. He shouts at the Chiryunin. No one in or out. Full lockdown protocol. The shell-shocked newbie stares at him in blank terror. Genma doesn't wait around to see if he'll piss his pants or not. He has a post to get to. By the time Genma reaches the Hokage Tower barely 5 minutes later, Konoha has mobilized for a full-scale enemy attack. Squadrons of shinobi are leaping to various stations throughout the village while more deploy to the surrounding forests and still more rush to the sites of the explosions to run damage control and assist the wounded. The alarm bells continue to rip through the air in a way that they haven't since that horrible night so many years ago. This is not the Fox, Genma reminds himself staunchly. They don't know what this is. He leaps through the window of the top floor and in only a few moments is through the doors of the Hokage's office. The room is abuzz with activity. Couriers and jonin and other ninja move in and out of the space nearly faster than the eye can follow. 5 masked ninja crouch in the corners of the room near the ceiling, visible in a rare display of overt threat. The room isn't silent, but not a single body makes unnecessary sound, not so much as one unnecessary word is spoken or movement made. The reports pouring into the room are immediately shuffled to various men and women who handle the details there within. At the center of the hurricane is Hiruzen, the Lord Third. He's quiet and steady, face calm even as his eyes flick over each new person that enters the room. His gaze lands on Genma and he gives an immediate nod. The assassin nods back and jogs to stand by his Hokage's side. Genma is here as a non-umbu guard, a check against even the narrowest possibility of a coup from within the most deadly and secretive branch of Konoha's military. Genma watches the 5 masked umbu in the room, and though he can't see their eyes, he knows they are watching him back. His senbon is still in his mouth and Genma grins around the deadly metal. His adrenaline is still riding high and Radu isn't here yet to curb his worst habits, so in umbu field code Genma signs to a hawk masked umbu on his flank, 5 on 1, I like my odds. He can't see the man's expression, but the barest flicker of tension moves through his muscles and his feet brace a fraction more firmly against the wall. Genma's grin sharpens and he lets the senbon click noisily against his teeth. Genma. The third's voice is smooth and composed, but Genma knows him well enough to hear the current of agitation underneath. Don't antagonize the umbu, please. We may be at war and I'd hate for one of them to stab you in the back in the fight to come. I'd like to see them try, Hokage-sama. Genma grins fearfully. Shikaku Nara on the desk's other side spares a precious second to send Genma a rather extraordinary eye roll before diving right back into simultaneously reading the 3 different reports he's holding. If the Hokage is the calm eye of the hurricane, then the Nara is the eye wall, a furious whirl of scrolls and papers and reports being read and discarded, questions and demands and commands being heard and relayed. A few more minutes pass of information gathering before Hiruzen speaks again, soft but still somehow the most commanding voice in the room. Shikaku, give me the rundown. The Nara snaps closed the scroll he's been reading and reports. 7 explosions in total, the 2 largest were on clan lands, 2 in residential districts, 1 at one of the lesser medical clinics, 1 at personnel archives and 1 at the foreign ninja barracks. No confirmed deaths but at least 40 injuries, most severe being the archival staff who are in fairly serious condition at Konoha General. No enemy forces have been confirmed yet and no further aggression noted. Hiruzen taps his chin, considering the information carefully. 4 new people step into the room before the Hokage can give any orders, and while everyone present is too good of a shinobi to show any obvious physical tell, Genma can feel the temperature in the room drop by several noticeable degrees. These people should not be here. Baki of the Sand and his 3 wards, including the Ichibai Jinhiriki, glance about with notable unease. Silence holds for several long beats before Baki says, voice deep and careful, Hokage-sama, please pardon our intrusion into your office in what I'm certain are less than ideal times, but I am willing to exchange information on these attacks for the promise that my wards and I will not be harmed. Shikaku narrows his eyes and opens his mouth, but Hiruzen cuts him off. Very well, I grant you quarter in these proceedings. You and your students will not be harmed by shinobi of the leaf. Baki nods and some of the anxious tension leaves his shoulders, though not all of it. The tense silence holds for several long beats as the Sand Jonin gathers his thoughts. The blonde genin girl next to him shifts, fingers dancing along the edges of her battle fan, and the older boy in face paint looks about the room nervously. Gaara of the Sand simply stares out a window, a nearly considerate look on his face as he studies the pillars of smoke visible through the glass. There is something to the boy's expression that Genma can't help but note, some hint of contentment. Beiki finally speaks. Over the course of these Chunin exams, the village hidden in the sand and the village hidden in the sound conspired to attack and destroy Konoha. Genma refocuses instantly at this bombshell, teeth tightening on the needle in his mouth and killing intent blooming under his skin. He's not the only one. Loyal Konoha shinobi all over the room drop hands to their weapons and some even take threatening steps forward. The blonde Sand Kunoichi grips her battle fan and moves to step in front of her siblings. Beiki sets a hand on her shoulder, stilling her movement and continuing his speech. Tension threads even more thickly through his voice and sweat beads at his temple. However, clearly Otogakuer has broken its concord with us in these attacks, especially considering the explosion that Gaara narrowly defended us from at our assigned barracks. The room's mood doesn't improve exactly, but no one actively attacks the Sand Nin either. Beiki presses on, bowing partially to the Hokage while not taking his eyes off the hostile ninja surrounding him. He continues saying, I choose to abandon any previously ordered antagonism against Konoha and instead trust the mercy of the Leaf and her Hokage. Genma is still pissed but also grudgingly impressed. More than just dropping an earth-shattering collection of information wrapped into a few simple sentences, Beiki has managed to put himself and his wards in the most advantageous position possible considering the shitty hand they were dealt. Genma can see how the Sand Ninja's interpretation of events makes sense. Otogakuer pretends to ally with Sand, with the intent to double-cross them all along. They set and detonate the explosions and then blame the attacks on Suna. Sand, upon closer scrutiny by the Leaf, would be found out to have plans to attack the village and thus would be summarily eradicated without mercy. It forces Suna into a position where they are without the advantage of surprise and outnumbered in enemy territory. Their subsequent destruction by the Leaf's hand would take a player off the board so that Sound could expand their influence further. Beiki, likely seeing all this, had moved before Sound could act to lay blame or fabricate evidence. He had rushed to the heart of the Leaf with the Kazekige's children to save any chance Sand had left at getting out of this mess alive. It makes sense. But something about it isn't sitting right with Genma. Shikaku is also looking uncertain, and the Hokage is stroking his chin, considering. Sarutobi's brown eyes drift to Gaara of the Sand who is standing quietly next to his sensei, still watching the column of smoke out the window. There's something about the boy that seems almost, the faintest hint, smug. Hiruzen freezes suddenly, eyes still locked on the Ichibai Jinhiriki. He doesn't give any reaction to what Beiki has said and instead commands in a voice rippling with unease. Shikaku, tell me the confirmed, precise locations of the explosions one more time. Without asking why, even though a hint of confusion twists across his face, Shikaku begins to list them off. The Uchiha compound, a park and playground on the west side Shinobi residential district, a medical teaching clinic on the north side, the Heitake compound dash. Hiruzen cuts him off, lurching to his feet, his face going pale. I need the status and location of Team 7, now. One of the Umbu, a kunoichi with a mongoose mask, immediately presses her hands into the ram sign and begins to concentrate. Several long beats of silence pass. They aren't within my range, Hokage-sama, Mongoose says. Sarutobi's hands clench on top of the desk, knuckles going white. I saw them just over an hour ago, Lord Third, Genma offers. They left by the main gate to run the village perimeter as a team before Uzumaki and Harino had to prepare for their matches today. Hiruzen takes this information like a physical attack, slumping slightly and face twisting. If that were true Genma, Shikaku says, then the censor Umbu would have been able to locate them. They're either out of her range or masking their chakra. Hokage-sama, do you have reason to believe they were captured? Hiruzen drags an old scarred hand over his face, takes a long breath and then responds. They haven't been captured. They're going rogue. There are several long beats of silence in the office, no one quite able to process what Sarutobi is saying. The possibility of an entire Genin team going rouge seems so far-fetched as to be nearly laughable. Especially Team 7, containing the last loyal Uchiha, one of the deadliest Jonin in Konoha's entire history, and the gods-damned vessel of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Genma thinks of Kakashi's smiling eye that morning and the coldness in its depths that he's only now identifying in retrospect. He catches the barest flicker of movement out of the corner of his eye, and when he turns to look, the hawk-masked Umbu is gone. There aren't many reasons that an Umbu would leave the Hokage side at a time like this, and none of them are good. Genma catches Shikaku's eye and then signs route to the other man as surreptitiously as possible. Shikaku looks back at him, flabbergasted. What? Sue Genma for being good at noticing things going on in his own village, and also having the unfortunate habit of listening into conversations he probably isn't supposed to hear. And occasionally breaking into the Hokage's desk and reading whatever looks interesting. It's not his fault that he gets bored easily and that the world is technically at peace right now, so there isn't that much for someone specialized in wartime assassin to actually do. Glancing around the room again, Genma can't help but notice that Gaara of the Sand has a nearly imperceptible, tiny smile pulling across his usually blank expression as the Konoha war room stands in shock. Another tug of concern pulls at Genma's gut as he looks at the pale-eyed boy, but he dismisses it. Not his circus, not his monkey, or more accurately, not his tailed beast. Hiruzen's deep voice draws Genma from his worries. Any warmth or calm has disappeared to be replaced with harsh command. We have to send out a retrieval squad after Team 7 at once before they get too far beyond village limits. We can still contain this. Get meet some and dash. Another explosion rocks the building suddenly, this one drawn out into a low and constant rumble that sends Genma's teeth clattering together. Hiruzen spins and darts to the window, moving faster than someone his age should be able, looking to see what's befallen the leaf now. Whatever sight greets him in the light of the cold sunrise sends all the blood draining from his face. The doors to the office are flung open again, a Sand Nin with blood on her face stumbling in, closely followed by Reidu, pale and wide-eyed. The Sand Kunoichi speaks first, sounding terrified and desperate. Baki-san, it's the Kaze cage, he's dash. Reidu speaks over her. Hokage-sama, there's been a summons. It's the snake Manda, Anko is saying it's dash. Orochimaru. Hiruzen finishes, the sadness in his voice overpowering the anger one would expect to hear from a Hokage whose village is under attack. Why is Sound attacking now? I had assumed they intended to frame Suna. Why else would they plant those bombs? Baki shouts, supporting the injured Kunoichi. No. Hiruzen turns from the window, face haggard. He looks more like the old man he is than Genma has ever seen him. Those bombs were laid by one of ours. It seems that we may have dodged the blades of one enemy. He gestures to Baki and the still bleeding Sand Nin at his side, only to take the blow from two more in our back. Genma stares at his Hokage. Hiruzen is hiding it well, but under the thin, calm veneer he looks devastated. Understandably so. Orochimaru aside, as much as you can set aside someone as terrifying and downright fucked up as Orochimaru, Kakashi Hatake as a rogue ninja is something that Genma can barely begin to process. The infamous Copy Nin's skill is terrifying. He's terrifying. Genma moved through Kakashi's orbit fairly regularly when he was on Minato's war guard, and even as a teenager the man had been a force of nature. And that was before Umbu got a hold of him. With an additional decade of bloody successes under his belt, the man called Hound makes Genma look like a lapdog in comparison. And then there is the rest of Team 7. They may only be genin, but Genma knows that the pink-haired Kunoichi had been top of her class, and Sasuke Uchiha's name alone proves his value and potential as a powerful ninja. And then there is Naruto Uzumaki, or more succinctly, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Konoha just let the threat equivalent of 100 million paper bombs walk out of its front gates. I'll handle Orochimaru, the Lord Third says, hands braced against the desk in front of him like he needs it to keep standing. You four Umbu are with me. Reidu, start directing our forces to find and eliminate any and all sound shinobi in our walls. No mercy and no prisoners. They launched an attack on our village's soil, so we will see them buried under it. Reidu bows stiffly and, spinning on his heels, darts out of the room. Genma watches him leave, and only more than a decade of fighting alongside his best friend helps him quell the fear of watching Reidu vanish to do battle against an untested and unknown force. Shikaku, Hiruzen continues, contact Danzo. Have him help coordinate retrieval efforts for Team 7. Genma cannot repress the curl his lip gives at the name, and even stoic Shikaku's face gives a tick of displeasure. Hokage-sama, are you sure? The Jonin commander starts, but Hiruzen cuts him off with a voice as absolute and sharp as a whip. Shikaku, in case you weren't aware, the Leaf Village is under attack from my former student who defected and is now an S-rank missing nin. Moreover, we are currently at risk of losing not only our entire remaining population of Sherry non-users but also our Jinchuriki. Would you truly like to question my orders in bringing in a capable and time-tested member of Konoha's government to rectify this crisis of immeasurable proportion? Or would you rather stand around and discuss issues long settled while Team 7 escapes and becomes a new band of S-rank missing nin that can, say, return at some point down the line to further decimate our village as Orochimaru is doing now? Would you like to see a repeat of what the Kyuubi no Kitsune can do when turned against our people? Fuck, thinks Genma. Danzo may be a conniving bastard, but Sarutobi is right, they can't afford to be picky right now. Shikaku's lips are a thin line of agitation, but he also seems to have fallen in line. Yes, Hokage-sama, he says and, bowing low, leaves the office. Genma watches Hiruzen take a long, slow breath, steadying himself. Then the third Hokage steps out from behind his desk and moves towards the door. He falls in behind him immediately, steps silent against the stretching shadow his Hokage leaves in his wake. Gemma's stomach twists, not unlike the giant snake that sits at the heart of his village. Minato had been right on the money all those years ago, as he so often was. Genma's instincts had been correct, everything has changed. Check the description for the links to the author.